Chapter 1265. About an hour later, the news reached the ears of Chen Guang, who was in the 9th holy city. He immediately decided to go to the 5th floor to find out the situation. He had only 2 guesses. Either it was the Protoss players, or it was some kind of aborigines who could transcend the rules of the real martial domain. No matter which possibility it was not good news. If it was the Protoss, then the arrogant Protoss must have discovered the potential threat of a large human organization like Tian. This meant that Xianqin and Wu Miaowan would be immediately reset. Tian, which had been operating well under the management of the two, would suffer heavy losses. It also meant that from now on, the Protoss would selectively attack other high-level personnel in Tian. The rest of the world's major organizations would also be in danger. This possibility was not high. After all, the Protoss players that Chen Guang had come into contact with so far were quite arrogant. They looked down on human players. Why would an elephant specifically look for a bigger ant to step on in order to prevent the ants in its eyes from becoming stronger? But if it was the aborigines of the real martial domain, then there was only one possibility. The other party was from the evil ghost faction. Xianqin and Wu Miaowan led a team to the 5th holy city's city lord's mansion to negotiate and expose their identity. The evil ghost faction guessed the relationship between the two and himself. They planned to capture the two to threaten him. Therefore, the other party only took them away and did not kill them on the spot. This was also not good news. For a long time, only Chen Guang could transcend the rules of the real martial domain. But now the people of the evil ghost faction had this ability. It could only further prove that the philosophy of the evil ghost faction had always been correct. There was a vast and boundless plain in the 5th layer of the true martial world. And there was a towering 10,000-meter tall mountain in this vast plain. The mountain was covered with snow all year round. The journey from the foot of the mountain to the top was extremely difficult. But if Chen Guang was here, he could see with his eyesight that there were many people with white clothes and white pants on the snowy mountain. They had white hair and were running on the snowy ground. In the col halfway up the mountain, there was a large building built with white bricks. Under this almost perfect cover, not many people would have thought that there was such a huge city in the mountains hidden here. This was the headquarters of the Evil Ghost faction in the 5th layer of the true martial world. The Evil Ghost faction, which had been developing for 100,000 years, seemed to be struggling under the continuous strangulation of the 9 great holy cities, but there were always some amazing talents that appeared after a generation and fiercely raised the power of the Evil Ghost faction. For example, the White City in the snowy mountains was built by the invincible Martial Venerable, who dominated the 5th layer. No one was allowed to defy the rules of the true martial world. So this revered martial artist was invincible among his peers. He was even able to challenge Wu Ba. In fact, he had killed a Wu Ba expert more than once when he had rushed to the 6th floor. However, he eventually returned here and stirred up a bloody storm on the 5th level. He led the insidious ghost faction to suppress the holy city on the 5th level and built White City secretly. Not until he grew old after dominating for nearly 1,000 years did the 5th holy city turn from defense to offense and take the initiative. At this time, Xianqin and Wu Miaowan were imprisoned in the ice prison of this White City. There was only one window in the entire cell. The railing on the window was made of ice that would not melt for thousands of years. Even a full blow from a martial emperor couldn't leave any mark on it. With Xianqin and Wu Miaowan's abilities, it was impossible for them to escape. However, the ones who made them give up resisting were the 2 middle-aged women standing in front of them. At this moment, Xianqin and Wu Miaowan couldn't describe their feelings at all. When they were captured, the 2 of them thought that they were dead meat. However, after they arrived here, the 2 little girls almost burst into tears after the 2 mysterious people in front of them took off their cloaks that covered their faces. If it weren't for the fact that they had become the Vice Minister of Heaven and also held the position of Sect Master, the 2 young girls had long been tempered to be much more tenacious. The 2 of them really would have completely lost control. "Master, why are you here?" Xianqin's lips trembled as she looked at the cold and indifferent nun in front of her. After a while she said such a sentence. Wu Miaowan swallowed her saliva and said in a trembling voice, "Master? Aren't you dead?" The two of them had seen their masters die with their own eyes. But now the two masters were standing in front of them alive. Their voices and smiles couldn't be faked. The scene made them feel like they were in a dream, and they didn't even want to wake up. It had been about 30 seconds since the two masters took off their masks. At first, the two little girls thought they were dreaming. Then they pinched their thighs hard to make sure that they were awake. Then they asked these two questions half tentatively and half out of control. Abbess Xian Yuan and Wu Qingming looked at each other in surprise, but they were also very confused. Originally, they planned to interrogate the two foreign women on the spot and find out the relationship between them and the mastermind, Saint Emperor Zhen Wu. However, the behavior of these two people seemed a little strange, which made the two pillars of the evil ghost sect, who had dominated the world for decades, feel a little confused. Did they catch the wrong people? Or maybe the information was wrong. These two foreign guests had nothing to do with the Saint Emperor Zhen Wu at all. Were they just two idiots who talked nonsense? In the end, the two changed their minds at the last minute. Without asking a word, they turned around and left, leaving Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan looking at each other. After a long time, the two of them came to their senses and looked at each other blankly for more than 10 seconds. Then Xian Qin asked first, "It seems that the masters don't recognize us?" Wu Miaowan also thought about it. "It seems so." Xian Qin slapped her forehead. "Sigh, what the hell is going on? I feel so confused now. My mind is in a mess." Wu Miaowan looked up at the sky. "I don't understand either. It was clearly said that this was just a game. No matter how real this game is, it is just a game. But why did we meet people who are exactly the same as Master here? I don't understand." "I don't understand either. I've never wanted to take a loudspeaker to the ear of the swollen chrysanthemum chief and ask him loudly what the hell is going on." Xian Qin let out an inexplicable sigh. Then, she immediately realized something and exclaimed, "That's strange. What's the title of swollen chrysanthemum chief? Isn't Chen Guang the minister?" Wu Miaowan was also puzzled. "It's quite strange. I think it sounds familiar too. I think I've heard it somewhere before, but I can't remember where." "That's impossible. Both of us have photographic memories since we were young. How can we not even remember what Chen Guang is called? There are too many things that are impossible. This is just a small matter. The important thing is, why did the masters appear here? Why don't they remember us? Also, are they the same person as Master? Is it possible that this is just a nightmare for us? Or an inner demon left behind by our weak martial arts foundation?" Xian Qin patted Wu Miaowan's shoulder. "Stop joking. How can the two of us meet an inner demon at the same time? Could it be that our inner demons are telepathic?" Wu Miaowan shrugged. "That's true. Forget it. It seems that the two of us are in trouble this time. However, Chen Guang is a beyond S-class after all. Even if we are reset, he can at least tell us what happened after we get out. We won't have as many regrets as ordinary players. That's probably the only way." The doubts in their minds suddenly became greater. But in the end, they could not come to any conclusion. They could only come up with nothing. Outside the ice prison, although Abbess Xian Qing and Wu Qingming were separated by 3 layers of ice walls, they could still hear the conversation between the two girls inside clearly. Wu Qingming shook her flowery clothes and said with a playful expression, "Abbess, what do you think about what these two little girls said?" Abbess Xian Qing shook her horsetail whisk and said coldly, "Playing tricks. It's inexplicable." However, Wu Qingming frowned. "Even so, in my eyes, when these two people called us master, they didn't seem to be faking it. They seemed to be sincere." Abbess Xian Qing was speechless. She and Wu Qingming had known each other for many years and knew each other very well. Wu Qingming's medical skills could be said to be amazing. Under her constant deduction and improvement, her self-created myriad flower art was enough to suppress the many divine arts left by the true martial holy emperor. However, these were not what Wu Qingming was best at. She had a pair of eyes that could see through people's hearts. She was best at figuring out people's hearts by observing their words and expressions. At the same time, She was also very good at using words to spy on others and shake them. This was also the reason why the evil ghost faction could go against the trend in the past few decades after the two of them joined the evil ghost faction. It was because of Wu Qingming's ability to read people. She reorganized the teachings of the evil ghost faction and made them into teaching materials. First, she trained a large group of subordinates who were both eloquent and skilled in martial arts. Then, these people secretly preached and expanded their influence. The way it operated was somewhat similar to the pyramid selling in the real world. Now that Wu Qingming said so, it proved that the two of them did not seem to be faking it. However, the two of them still didn't understand why. In their memory, they were born and grew up here. They were the natives of the true martial domain. It was only in this life that they suddenly became enlightened. From the first layer of the true martial domain, they had worked hard all the way until they achieved their current strength and status. Because of their feelings, they became the pillar of the so-called evil ghost faction. Others called them the evil ghost faction. Although they recognized this name, deep in their hearts, they firmly believed that they were the righteous side. The two of them had never had a real disciple, let alone a disciple of an outsider from the outer world. Forget it, we will go and interrogate them tomorrow. Abbess Xanqing finally took this principle. Wu Qingming nodded. Well, we have to ask them tomorrow no matter what. The true martial holy emperor should also be able to transcend the suppression of the true martial domain. However, it will take at least a few days to reach the 5th layer from the 9th layer. Moreover, it is not so easy to find our white town. Chapter 1266. However, Chen Guang was sitting on a new type of plane that had been manufactured with the best materials of the 9th holy city. This plane was pitch black in color and was emitting a strange light. It wasn't made of the skin of a strange beast, nor was it made of the beams of mysterious wood. Instead, it was made of a very special kind of metal. It was very cold to the touch. In fact, it would condense into frost in a short time if water was sprinkled on it. However, this frost couldn't adhere to the plane's fuselage. The frost would fall off with a slight breeze. This material was extremely smooth. In fact, it even had the special effect of repelling and resisting air. Moreover, it was extremely tough and had good toughness. It could be restored by its toughness and the memory of the metal, as long as it wasn't thoroughly destroyed after it had been shaped. It could be said to be an excellent material for making the plane's fuselage. In fact, it was even more perfect than the most advanced special alloys on Earth. According to the 3 emperors of the Holy City, this alloy had been extracted from a pitch-black boulder at the foot of the highest peak, where Chen Guang had meditated for thousands of years in the past. Millions of years ago, Chen Guang had meditated here before he had become a martial sage. He had practiced his martial power. His internal energy had stimulated the yin and yang energy in the true martial world to circulate endlessly, and it had swept through the black boulder over and over again. This ordinary black boulder had gained spirituality after the martial sage had left. It had even absorbed the yin and yang energy on its own. It had grown and brewed by itself for millions of years. Finally, a large piece of this magical metal had been brewed inside it, and it had been discovered by a martial emperor who had happened to pass by several hundred years ago. More than 100 martial emperors had been led by 3 martial emperors. They had spent more than half a year in order to mine and smelt this ore, and they had finally forged its main body into the fuselage of the plane. The leftover bits and pieces had been forged into dozens of divine weapons, and they had been used to reward the many powerhouses who had participated in the mining and smelting of this ore. The longevity art old man had a proud and worshipful look on his face when he had told Chen Guang about the origin of this plane's material. However, Chen Guang had wanted to laugh. How could I tell you that there was such a smart stone that could absorb the yin and yang energy on its own? It was clear that when the old man was meditating, the 7 tendons and 8 meridians of his body automatically opened up. Well, this was a more sophisticated way of saying it. To put it more simply, as one's cultivation deepened, the flow of qi in one's body would automatically evolve. Whether it was tendons, veins, bones, or internal organs, they would automatically get rid of the impurities and retain the good. To put it more simply, it was actually the gas excreted from one's buttocks while sitting on a rock while meditating. What did it feel like to fly a plane made of black iron made from his own fart? Chen had said, flying a plane made of black iron. Fortunately, he didn't let Chu Zijin and Lu Fei board the plane as well. Otherwise, he really couldn't afford to lose face. As for the longevity-jeweled man, he had a look of admiration on his face when he had talked about the origin of this so-called black iron metal, especially when he had mentioned that this custom-made plane had been the noblest ride in the entire Zhenwu Jia for a long time. He had felt a bit of sympathy for these people. However, he had a good character. He didn't say it out loud. He would let this matter be an eternal secret in the true martial realm. At least, everyone could keep good memories. About a day and a half later, Chen Guang flew to the sky of the fifth sacred city at a very fast speed. He was much earlier than the estimated time of Abbess Xian Yuan and others. Sure enough, you get what you pay for. This special metal that had been broken by his own fart for thousands of years, and then brewed for millions of years, was really powerful. Its flying speed was incomparable to the previous broken goods. It could withstand more internal energy, and it could even land smoothly after arriving at the destination. When he got off the plane, Chen Guang couldn't help but pat the fuselage of the plane gently. Along the way, he had a feeling that he and the plane were connected. It was as if they could be integrated into one. He could control it, as if it had become a part of his body. However, he immediately remembered the origin of the black iron. He felt a chill. He turned his head and slammed a hole on the ground. Then, he hid the plane in it and turned away. He really didn't want to admit that it was really a part of his body in a sense. A dignified Saint Emperor personally leading an expedition to the fifth floor was a matter that would shake the entire true martial realm. However, Chen Guang did not inform anyone. He chose to arrive by himself and sneak into the fifth sacred city. The only people who knew that he had left the ninth sacred city were the old man, Chu Zijin, and Lu Fei, who personally sent the plane to him. Chen Guang's whole face was hidden under the dark bamboo hat. He walked slowly on the street. At this time, his attire was not very eye-catching. The style of masked swordsman was popular in the true martial realm. Along the way, Chen Guang found many outsiders in the eyes of others, and players in his eyes in the crowd on the street. Chen Guang's judgment wasn't based on their attire, but purely on the differences in speech, behavior, and temperament between the players and the natives of the true force domain. Moreover, with Chen Guang's eyes, he could directly see the differences in the souls of the two groups of people. He didn't see a single Protoss player in the city. Presumably, these people didn't want to bow down to the natives of the true force domain. However, they couldn't stand the enemy's relentless pursuit of death. So they simply didn't enter the city and sought peace and quiet. By now, the Protoss players must have already known that the ancient well had been lost. They must also be looking for it. They must have planned to hide the ancient well, after finding it, and cut off the escape route of the ordinary players. Chen Guang didn't go to the Lord of the Fifth Holy City. He also didn't meet up with the members of the Heaven Division, who were staying in the Fifth Holy City, thinking of ways to rescue and find the two deputy ministers. Instead, he chose to wander alone, seemingly aimlessly. He even forcibly suppressed the aura that he exuded to the level of an ordinary revered martial artist. For the next 3 days, he lingered in the big taverns and tea houses of the Fifth Holy City, like an ordinary vagabond. He drank wine everywhere, chatted with people, and threw out some remarks that echoed the doctrine of the Dark Ghost faction. At night, he would go to the locations of the suspicious people that he had recorded during the day. He would first use words to probe and interrogate them. Once he found any signs, he would decisively use the soul-searching technique. However, even though he had captured quite a few members of the Shady Ghost sect, their ranks seemed to be very low. These people did not even know who was in charge of the Fifth Sacred City, let alone find out where Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan had been captured. Hard work paid off. On the third night, he finally found the person he was waiting for. It was a high-level lobbyist of the Dark Ghost faction, hiding in the Fifth Holy City. He could wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, but he found it by chance without even looking for it. He didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to send himself to him, after he couldn't find him, after so much effort. Mr. Dang, have you heard of the Dark Ghost faction? The owner of one of the taverns that he frequented quietly found the hotel where he was staying. He knocked on the door and asked straightforwardly. Chen Guang pretended to be stunned at first. Then, he deliberately looked at the owner with fear. He shook his head fiercely as if he was hiding something. I don't know what you're talking about. Chapter 1267. This boss had been hiding in the fifth sacred city for hundreds of years. He had long been a core figure of the evil ghost faction, in the fifth layer of the true martial domain. Since the rise of Wu Qingming, her lectures had been widely spread in the evil ghost faction. This tavern owner was the first person to learn the evil ghost faction's speech technique to the great realm. The reason was very simple. To put it bluntly, the tavern in this world was equivalent to the bar in the real world. To open a bar, one had to deal with people from all walks of life. One had to go through the three paths of black, white and gray. Such a person, who had lived for hundreds of years with his own unique skills, was already a genius among geniuses. After learning professional speaking skills, his eyes were even more insightful. At this time in his eyes, Chen Guang was hesitant to speak. It was clear that he had heard about the evil ghost faction long ago. Moreover, he was very interested in it. Mr. Dang, let's not resort to insinuations in front of an honest person. I heard you talking to someone in my tavern at noon. You talked about why there hasn't been a second martial sage in the true martial world for millions of years. Many of your views coincide with the teachings of the evil ghost faction. I know you are afraid of the evil ghost faction, but now is different from the past. The 9 sacred cities are strong in appearance, but weak in reality. There is nothing to worry about. If it weren't for the sudden return of the martial sage and the foreign guests, the martial emperors in the sacred city would not be a match for the 2 saints of the evil ghost faction. We are on the 5th layer here. No matter how powerful the martial sage is, he can't control us. Don't look at the lord of the 5th sacred city. He can only rely on us to live. If we want, we can find a master to send him to reincarnation at any time. It's just a matter of whether we want to do it or not. The most powerful revered martial artist in the true martial domain is not up there. As he said, the tavern owner pointed to the direction of the 6th layer. He meant that the most powerful revered martial artist was not cultivating in the 6th and 7th layers. Instead, he was on the 5th layer. Moreover, he was a member of the evil ghost faction. Chen Guang looked a little shaken as he said, "But I heard that martial saints can bypass the restrictions and come from the 9th floor to the 5th floor. With the strength of a martial saint, when the time comes, I'm afraid that these people you mentioned will be easily destroyed, right?" The owner of the tavern did not think much of it. What kind of joke is this? A martial sage only returns once every several million years. How far is the journey from the 9th floor to our 5th floor? Do you think that a martial sage would be so bored that he would come here? Chen Guang nodded with a look of understanding. But although I know about the evil ghost faction, why do you like me? The tavern owner chuckled. Mr. Dang, many of your ideas coincide with the teachings of my shady ghost faction. I also heard that you fought with a venerable martial artist named Cheng Long in the Red Maple Tavern the other day. When Chen Guang heard this, he nodded proudly. That rascal called Cheng Long thinks that he can do whatever he wants in the 5th sacred city, just because he's a martial honor. I don't like him, so I just punished him. I'm afraid it's not like that, right? I heard that Mr. Dang only used one palm to suppress Cheng Long to the ground, and he couldn't move. After another palm, his legs were shattered and his cultivation was completely destroyed. I'm afraid this can't be called a punishment. Chen Guang suddenly became vigilant. Are you here to stand up for him? The tavern owner shook his head fiercely. Cheng Long and I are just acquaintances. Why should I stand up for him? However, Cheng Long is a well-known veteran expert in the 5th sacred city, but he was destroyed by you with 2 palm strikes. In my opinion, Mr. Dang, you are qualified to be ranked in the top of the martial honor list. You can be regarded as one of the strongest 100 martial honors. And my shady ghost faction needs a young hero like you. After all, those who can be ranked in the martial honor list can at least become martial emperor in the future, or even a martial emperor. Hearing the tavern owner talk about the martial honor list in a respectful tone, Chen Guang did not feel proud at all. He even wanted to laugh. What the hell is this? Although martial honors can show off in the 5th level, once they go up, they are not worth mentioning at all. Is it necessary to make a list of the strongest 100 people? Are you kidding me? Forget it. I'm a meat eater who doesn't understand the suffering of the lower class. Chen Guang sighed in his heart. He felt that he should not laugh at those who had dreams. What if I don't agree? He did not rush to agree, but asked in a half-probing and half-serious manner. The tavern owner snorted coldly. Then I'm sorry. I'm one of the 4 giants of the Shady Ghost faction in the 5th sacred city. My identity must be completely kept a secret. Although you were able to defeat the dragon-riding Martial Venerable with 2 palms, I have brought 7 people from the top 100 of the Martial Venerable leaderboard. As for myself, I'm sorry, I'm Yi Haolong, who is ranked 6th on the Martial Venerable leaderboard. Yi Haolong waved his hand, and 7 people suddenly stood up from all over Chen Guang's room. Including the tavern owner, there were a total of 8 martial honors surrounding Chen Guang. Chen Guang smiled bitterly and said helplessly, "It seems that I have to agree." "That's right, you have no choice." Chen Guang pretended to be very afraid. "But I heard that the Shady Ghost faction is not very fair and peaceful. You won't kill people at will, right?" Yi Haolong smiled proudly when he heard that. "Of course, who said that we're going to kill you? However, if you don't agree, we will use a more forceful method to invite you to the Shady Ghost faction school. We will let you eat and live with many students and attend classes every day. Believe me, in less than 3 to 5 years, you will definitely recognize our Shady Ghost faction. At that time, without my persuasion, you will take the initiative to find an expert that you think highly of, or your relatives and friends to join our faction." At this moment, Chen Guang finally understood what was going on. Wasn't this the standard method of selling something? No wonder the old man of longevity Ju said that the Shady Ghost faction had suddenly developed a lot in recent decades. At first, he thought that it was because of the 2 peerless experts, but he didn't expect that there was such a trick behind it. Chen Guang could only express admiration in his heart, and he was even more curious about it. After he nodded to agree, Yi Haolong immediately changed his face and came forward very enthusiastically. He put his hand on Chen Guang's shoulder and chatted with him very familiarly. Then he took him directly to the eastern district of the 5th holy city. In modern society, the eastern district was equivalent to a rich area. In the huge 5th holy city, any manor in the eastern district covered an area of more than 100 acres. Along the way, they also encountered the city guards of the 5th holy city, but surprisingly, these city guards turned a blind eye to them and directly let them go. Hearing those words, Chen Guang was shocked. After all, the 9 holy cities had announced a late-night martial law. When the city guards saw Yi Haolong at night, not only did they not come up to interrogate and investigate, but they deliberately changed the direction and let him go. This could only mean one thing. The forces of the Shady Ghost faction had already infiltrated the official forces of the 9 holy cities. Forget it. Since I bumped into this matter, I can't ignore it. When I find Xianqin and Wu Miaowan, I will destroy this Shady Ghost faction. At this moment, Chen Guang made up his mind. Xiao Dang, you are also an amazingly talented martial artist. I can see that you have such strength in this life, even though you are less than 100 years old. With your wisdom and talent, you have a good chance to become a martial emperor, or even a martial sovereign in the future. However, I don't know if you have ever thought that even if you have strong strength, we will never be able to transcend the true martial world like that martial sage Chen Guang. No matter how we come back to life, come back to life, come back to life, come back to life again and again. Yi Haolong had already begun to chat with Chen Guang on the street halfway. Chen Guang deeply agreed with his reasoning. Of course I know this is the case. Except for myself, trillions of people in the whole world are like this. With Yi Haolong's realm, he should not have realized these things. Chen Guang thought it was probably the words written in the Shady Ghost MLM teaching materials for him. It was all a trick. First, He used big concepts to fundamentally shake the worldview of the newcomers. Then, he carefully communicated with them. In short, it was brainwashing. Indeed, I vaguely remember some things about my previous life. Although I can't remember the specific name, I should have been a martial sovereign in my previous life. In this life, my cultivation speed is faster than in the previous life, and my foundation is more solid. However, I have no confidence to break through the martial sovereign and become a martial sage. Yi Haolong sneered. It's right that you have no confidence. Humph, the whole real martial world is a bunch of untouchables. Untouchables? Chen Guang pretended to be dissatisfied. If you say that we revered martial artists and the martial artists below us are untouchables, I will accept it. However, are martial sovereigns also untouchables? Yi Haolong nodded with hatred. Of course. Martial sovereigns are nothing more than untouchables of a higher level. It's just like the chickens and dogs we raise. Those that are beautiful, have pure bloodlines, and are good at fighting can live in prettier pens and dog cages. Those that are not as good will be placed in dirty and messy cages. That's all. How is this possible? Chen Guang continued to be dissatisfied. Why is it not possible? You have already realized it, but you don't want to admit it. Well, we have arrived. Coincidentally, there is a class today. Why don't you listen to it? Yi Haolong did not say anything else. Instead, he brought Chen Guang to the entrance of a huge manor. The group went inside, passed through a long corridor, and went deep underground. What appeared in front of Chen Guang was a splendidly decorated hall. The hall was brightly lit, and the air was filled with a comfortable and relaxing light fragrance. Under the hall sat a large group of martial artists wearing all kinds of clothes. Chen Guang looked around. Most of the people sitting in the crowd were martial monarchs, and heroes below revered martial artists. Yi Haolong patted Chen Guang's shoulder. Xiao Dang, your strength should be in the top 3 among the new students. Your seat is in the front row. Go and take a seat first. Following Yi Haolong's guidance, Chen Guang passed through the crowd under the envious and jealous gazes of the surrounding people. He sat on the 3 gilded soft chairs at the front of the first row. On the bench, there were already 2 beautiful women wearing silk clothes sitting next to him. They were looking at him with ingratiating gazes. With Chen Guang's cultivation and eyesight, he could see that the 2 women were still virgins. They were martial monarchs, and their appearance was even more beautiful. The treatment of the evil ghost sect was really not worth mentioning. They took good care of him, a stupid and cute newcomer, in all aspects. After arranging for Chen Guang to sit down, Yi Haolong greeted the other people in the hall, and then said to Chen Guang, Xiao Dang, you are lucky. Our main lecturer today is a senior martial lord from a higher level. He is also a top figure on the list of martial lords. Listening to him is better than reading books for 10 years. Really? Martial lords can't stay in the 5th level for a long time, can they? Chen Guang asked. Yi Haolong chuckled and said, You don't understand. When you finish all the courses and become our real family, you will know why our shady ghost sect has been growing stronger and stronger under the eyes of the 9 holy cities for decades. Chapter 1268. Watching Yi Haolong leave with satisfaction, Chen Guang hesitated for a few seconds. Finally, he sighed slightly and changed his mind. Originally, he planned to seize the evil ghost faction's lair in the 5th sacred city. Then, he would completely suppress the situation with a thunderous force. He would capture the person in charge here and directly search his soul. No matter how tight his mouth was, he could only confess obediently. But now, he didn't intend to do it immediately. Instead, he sat down and looked at this senior martial overlord from the 6th layer, who was boasted by Yi Haolong to be able to break through the limits of the true martial domain. What was so great about him? The most important thing was that Chen Guang had unknowingly developed a strong curiosity about how that person would give the lecture. As the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. Chen Guang felt that he was the strongest cat in the entire true martial domain. He would certainly not be killed by curiosity. So it was not a big deal to be a little curious. Although the so-called main lecturer had not appeared for a long time, the huge hall of the venue was not noisy. On the contrary, it was exceptionally quiet. Only a few of the most respected martial overlords, sitting in the front row, would laugh from time to time. There were two female martial overlords sitting around Chen Guang. One of them tried to whisper something in Chen Guang's ear in a very intimate tone. The other one was very careful to peel the skin of a crystal grape in front of her. However, Chen Guang didn't smile at this time. He didn't give these two a chance to get close to him. He just closed his eyes and rested, not paying attention to the outside world. In his life, he had seen many kinds of beautiful women. He had already become very picky. This kind of beauty arranged for him by others. Sorry, I don't like it. Moreover, even if the women in the true martial domain were virgins in this life, only God knew how many reincarnations they had experienced in their long lives, and how many lovers and partners they had experienced in these countless reincarnations. It wasn't that Chen Guang was obsessed with cleanliness to such an abnormal extent that he even despised other people after they had reincarnated. It was because the people in the true martial world were different from the people in the real world. Even if they were resurrected, it was still possible for them to retain part of their previous life's memories. Or, even if he gradually forgot everything after a few reincarnations, he couldn't rule out the possibility of suddenly awakening some of his past life's memories when he cultivated to a higher realm. That would be very awkward. Thus, even though these two female martial monarchs were extremely beautiful, he remained as still as a mountain. His indifference caused the other two martial saints, who were seated in the front row, to be unable to stand it any longer. Yi Haolong was one of the 4 giants of the 5th holy city of the Shady Ghost sect. His status in the Jianghu was even higher than the official city lord of the 5th holy city to some extent. He arranged 2 beauties for you out of goodwill, and they are even 2 virgin martial monarchs. Others can't even be envious of such benefits, yet you actually turn a blind eye to it? Aren't you making Lord Yi lose face? These 2 martial saints looked at the female companions beside them. The number was less than Chen Guang's. Each of them only had 1. Their beauty wasn't as good as Chen Guang's, and they weren't virgins either. Originally, when these 2 people saw that Chen Guang was so valued by Yi Haolong, they were a bit unhappy. Now they had a lot of complaints in their hearts. They couldn't be happy if they didn't say it out. We are all martial saints. Why is your treatment better than ours? Yet you don't seem to appreciate it. I say, aren't you a bit too disrespectful? Look at how upset you are making these 2 beauties. Is there anyone who puts on airs like you? The bearded man sitting on the left side of Chen Guang turned around and said with a serious face. The white-faced man sitting on the right side of Chen Guang also turned around when he heard the bearded man speak. That's right. I've heard that you have some ability. However, there are many capable people in the 5th holy city. Knocking down a dragon-riding martial saint is nothing. I'm afraid you should pay more respect to the kindness of your seniors. Chen Guang first looked to the left, then to the right. He didn't want to pay attention to these 2 people at all. He just rolled his eyes, looking like he didn't want to talk nonsense with them. He really wasn't putting on airs on purpose. It was really because the gap between him and these people was too big. In his eyes, he could slap everyone here to death without any psychological pressure. Would an elephant care about what an ant shouted at him? Of course not. Seeing that his attitude didn't change for the better, but became even colder and more arrogant, the bearded man and the white-faced man were instantly angry. Kid, let's go somewhere else. I'll definitely have a taste of your skills and see what you're capable of. The bearded man threw down these harsh words and sat up straight. He clenched his fists so hard that the veins on the back of his hands bulged. The white-faced man's eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything. However, a haze flashed across his face. He obviously had a plan in mind. With Chen Guang's perception, how could he not know that these 2 people wanted to kill him at the same time? But what did it matter? After waiting for another 10 minutes or so, the martial tyrant lecturer from the 6th floor finally arrived. However, no one in the conference hall looked unhappy because of waiting. Instead, their faces were full of anticipation. Only Chen Guang was looking around. He roughly divided the people in the conference hall into 3 types. The first type of people were newcomers like himself. Their faces were 30% curious, 30% hopeful, and 40% doubtful. There were also those who had probably already listened to a few so-called lectures. Their eyes were already 30% fanatical and 70% expectant. There were also those who looked like the two martial saints beside him. Their eyes were practically red. It was as if they could jump out and poke a hole in the sky at the command of the other party. Wasn't this clearly the real world, Sahem? Anyway, it was like that. Next, the white-robed martial tyrant, whose face was shrouded in mist and whose face could not be seen clearly, did not disappoint Chen Guang. He gave a rather unique lesson. The general idea was quite similar to what Yi Haolong and Chen Guang had said before. It was generally about some cages, resistance, freedom, and true living. Instead of being reincarnated in such a muddle-headed manner, living in the so-called illusion of immortality, we would rather enjoy true death. In the face of the cages imposed on us by others, only great perseverance, great determination, and the courage to give up life, even if we turn into malicious spirits, can we truly be free. In general, this provocative joke was indeed of a higher level than Yi Haolong's. Whether it was the rendering of emotions, or the substitution of the audience into his rhythm, this lower realm martial tyrant did a better job. In addition, it seemed that he had also practiced a mental cultivation method. It was similar to the Buddhist lion's roar. The principle of the evil sex sound wave technique was mixed in his voice, which made his speech more infectious. The blood of the other people in the conference hall was boiling as they listened. However, Chen Guang felt that it was nothing. The level of this speech was far worse than the one he had bragged about after he was lured into a pyramid scheme and rescued by his old friend. However, he still heard some very interesting remarks. The history of the entire true martial domain was fabricated before the appearance of the true martial saint. What we know is fake history. Those famous martial emperors with countless titles in the long river of history have never truly existed. The one who imprisoned us in this cage is none other than the so-called true martial saint emperor. The 9 great holy cities are his shackles in the true martial domain. They are his tools to enslave the entire true martial domain. Finally, this martial tyrant raised his arms and shouted in an impassioned tone, "For freedom! For true living! For true death! We, the Evil Ghost faction, hereby swear to fight against the 9 great holy cities and the true martial saint emperor to the end." Nearly 1,000 people in the conference hall shouted along with him. Even those who came to the lecture for the first time couldn't avoid it. Chen Guang looked left and right. Then, he imitated others and raised his arms high. He seemed quite sociable. However, he was commenting on this fellow's speech in his heart. If the full score was 100 points, he would give the other party 82 points. The remaining 18 points would be given to him in the form of 666. If he wasn't the true martial saint who was cursed to death by them, he wouldn't be able to empathize with the speech. Otherwise, he would have been dragged into the ditch by the other party. What they said was reasonable. The true martial saint emperor was simply too hateful. He was simply a scum, a beast. But what could I do? I was dragged into the ditch by Lu Li and the heavenly holy grail from the very beginning. He knew that perhaps the doctrine of the evil ghost faction was correct. He might not be a good person to the people in this world. He felt a trace of sadness in his heart. However, he felt even more helpless. However, he changed his mind. The people in the true martial domain were like this. The people in the transient sea were also the same. But on Earth, were the creatures and humans in the universe the same? Wasn't there the endless divine world above our heads? What about above the endless divine world? While he was lost in thought, the bearded man beside Chen Guang suddenly rushed over. Chen Guang thought that he was going to attack him, so he planned to kill him with one palm. However, he didn't expect that this fellow would directly grab Chen Guang's palm. His eyes were filled with tears. He said with a choked voice, "Brother, our attitude was not good just now. We offended you. Now, I understand that everyone's talent in martial arts is different. There must be a reason why Lord Yi values you so much. Now I apologize to you. I hope you can let bygones be bygones. From now on we will be a family. Your business is my business." "That's right. My wife. She is your wife. We are a family. We will live and die together. How can we kill each other before our great cause is accomplished? I am extremely ashamed of the crooked thoughts I had before." The white-faced man beside him also came over. He grabbed Chen Guang's other hand. His face was filled with tears of remorse. Chen Guang opened his mouth slightly. These two fellows are really sick. I was just pretending to raise my hand like the others. Why did they? The white-faced man waved his hand. A slightly weaker female revered martial artist who was sitting behind the three of them shyly walked forward. This female revered martial artist was indeed beautiful. She was even more beautiful than the two women that Yi Haolong had arranged for Chen Guang. The white-faced man grabbed Chen Guang's hand even more attentively. He pointed at the female revered martial artist and said, "Brother, my wife is also your wife." Chen Guang roughly understood why Yi Haolong said that he would be infected by others after staying in the evil ghost faction for a long time. Damn, isn't this too generous? We have only met for the first time today. It is impossible for us to be so familiar with each other in our next lives. Yi Haolong walked over with a smile. He clapped his hands in front of the three of them and said to Chen Guang, "Don't be impatient." Then he looked at Chen Guang. "How was it, Xiaodang? Are you satisfied with today's lesson?" Chen Guang felt embarrassed. Fortunately, his acting skills were good. He nodded heavily. "I deeply agree with you. I am enlightened. I wish I could have come 10 years earlier." Yi Haolong was satisfied. The fact that you can think like this proves that today's trip was not in vain. Follow me. Lord Sky Martial Tyrant wants to see you alone. Chapter 1269. It turned out that the white-robed man was called the Firmament Martial Lord. His name sounded very domineering, but in the true martial domain, this kind of person could only be arrogant in the 6th floor. In the 7th, 8th, and 9th floors, it was easy to be killed by others. However, Chen Guang was already used to it. The dragon-riding martial lord, who was knocked down by him with 2 fingers, did not say anything. The Firmament Martial Lord was actually quite low-key. Of course, others did not know that it seemed that he had used 2 palms. But in fact, he had only used the strength of his fingers at that time. And it was even his little finger. If he had used his middle finger, he was afraid that the entire 5th sacred city would be overturned. "Brother, since Lord Firmament has invited you, you should hurry up." The bearded man next to him continued to flatter him. The white-faced man also continued to hold Chen Guang's hand and said with great emotion, "Yes, the 2 of us have joined the evil ghost faction for so many years, but we have never had the opportunity to be received by a special envoy from above. Brother, since you are so valued, don't forget me when you become successful in the future. By the way, my younger sister is also a martial venerable with the same appearance as my wife, but she is giving a lecture outside today and has not come back. My wife, little sister, and I will wait for you together." Looking at the white-faced man's extremely eager eyes, Chen Guang finally understood that although this man had cultivated to martial venerable in this life, he was most likely a prostitute in his previous life. His professional instinct was too strong, and it was inherited in this life. How could Chen Guang stand his tricks? He decisively followed Yi Haolong and left. In fact, the white-faced man and the bearded man did not know at this time that the white-faced man's continuous unconventional behavior had saved their lives. Originally, Chen Guang planned to send these 2 rude young men to hell when he had time, and then they would be heroes after 18 years. But now he was a little reluctant. This young man was a talent. He followed Yi Haolong through the main door of the conference hall and went straight inside and saw the so-called Firmament Martial Lord. Chen Guang had thought that the Firmament Martial Tyrant would brag about his noble status and put on airs. Little did he expect that the Firmament Martial Tyrant, who had maintained a solemn expression during the lecture, would actually smile like a Maitreya Buddha. His entire body was brimming with uncontrollable enthusiasm. "Hey Xiaodang, you're here. Please take a seat. I just arrived at the 5th sacred city yesterday. Brother Long has been praising you in front of me. There are countless geniuses in the true martial world, but I haven't seen a genius like you for a long time. Counting the days, little Dang, your talent is worthy of appearing once every 50 years. Now that my Yin Ghost sect has found a talented person, I really want to get close to you." At that moment, Chen Guang was stunned. In his memory, The law of the jungle used to be extremely strict in the true martial world. The gap between each level could be said to be very clear. Unless he was a disciple of a great clan, a normal martial tyrant would never address a martial saint as brother. Furthermore, the firmament martial tyrant's enthusiasm, when he spoke to him, was not an act, but a genuine feeling from the bottom of his heart. The firmament martial tyrant's behavior was completely different from his impression of the martial artists of the true martial world. The firmament martial tyrant saw that Chen Guang was a bit stunned, as if he hadn't come back to his senses and was frightened. However, the firmament martial tyrant didn't feel offended. Instead, he comforted Chen Guang. "What's wrong? You're not used to my enthusiasm? It's okay. You'll get used to it slowly. People only know that the name of our Yin Ghost sect is not righteous. They think that we're evil sections. They don't know that the so-called Yin Ghost doesn't have any evil intentions. We have a clear conscience in our actions. We only seek to free the common people of the true martial world. The so-called high or low status is nothing more than a difference of sooner or later. Today, you're a martial saint, and I look at you as an equal. In the future, when you become a titled martial emperor, you'll also look at other martial saints, and even martial monarchs with the same eyes as me." Yi Haolong, who was next to him, also smiled. "That's right. Not to mention Lord Firmament. Even the two saints of our Yin Ghost sect, who are far more powerful than the 3 emperors of the 9th sacred city, will be friendly and harmonious with you if you have the opportunity to meet them. We're all in the same boat. In fact, we should work together as a family." Looking at these two people, Chen Guang's mood fluctuated slightly. He even wavered in his heart. Am I really going to destroy the Yin Ghost sect? However, he immediately shook his head fiercely. Could it be that I've also been brainwashed? Yi Haolong saw that Chen Guang was lost in thought. He continued, "Xiao Dang, actually, I called you here this time because I sincerely hope that you can join us sincerely. You've also seen what kind of existence we are. It can even be said that whether it's fictional history or the real history, after the true martial saint emperor left for the first time, our Yin Ghost sect is definitely an unprecedented existence." The firmament martial tyrant raised his head again and said, "Our real purpose is not to rebel against anyone. You should feel that we want to change the entire true martial domain. We want everyone to no longer be shackled by these 9 so-called levels. Even the weaklings living in the first level should have a real life and not become enslaved tools." Chen Guang let out a long sigh. "Previously, I did have a lot of prejudice against the Yin Ghost sect. After seeing it today, I really have a lot of feelings." Hey, why do you need to feel anything? Remember this sentence. You just need to have a clear conscience. By the way, these are some of my experiences that I recorded when I was still a martial venerable. Don't refuse it. Take it and study it in detail. It may be helpful to you. As the firmament martial tyrant spoke, he took out a small book from his robe and stuffed it into Chen Guang's hand without any explanation. Chen Guang looked down. The book looked wrinkled, but it was made of special paper that was quite strong. The seemingly old book didn't have the slightest smell. It even had a faint fragrance. The firmament martial tyrant must have carried it with him when he was cultivating and studied it every day. After being infused with yin and yang qi, this seemingly ordinary book contained the essence of Tao principles. That was why it had such a strange fragrance. It smelled like black iron that came out of one's fart. The firmament martial tyrant was indeed sincere. It was unknown whether it was his nature, or he had been brainwashed by the teachings of the Yin Ghost sect. Chen Guang raised his head and looked at him. The firmament martial tyrant just smiled, as if he was sparing no effort to cultivate the younger generation. Chen Guang gritted his teeth. He had to admit that he had to make a decision as soon as possible. Otherwise, he might really become one of the Yin Ghost sect's people if he continued like this. He was just about to refuse the firmament martial tyrant's kindness. Unexpectedly, the white-robed firmament martial tyrant said, "You should keep this book first. An old friend of mine has asked me for it many times, but I refused to lend it to him. If he sees this book in your hands, I'm afraid he will follow you all day and harass you. The matter in the 5th sacred city has been settled. I'm going to White City first, and then return to the 6th floor. I wonder if you're interested in going with me? Chen Guang asked in confusion. White City? That's right. That's the real core of the Yin Ghost sect on this floor. People who are not from the Orthodox sect are not allowed to enter. If you go with me, it means that you've officially joined the Yin Ghost sect. Every new martial venerable is qualified to enter White City and get a residence there. The yin and yang qi in that place is extraordinarily rich, and it's even better than the sacred city. The most important thing is that you're very lucky this time. You'll have a chance to meet a real big shot. How about it? Do you want to go? After saying that, the firmament martial tyrant looked at Chen Guang expectantly. Chen Guang subconsciously wanted to avoid his eyes. He felt ashamed. But in the end, his acting skills burst out. There was a brief hesitation in his eyes, and then it quickly changed into determination. In the end, he nodded heavily, but there was more expectation in his eyes. I'll go. Chapter 1270. After all, he still had to go to the base of the evil ghost sect. After all, Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan were likely to be imprisoned there. As for the big shot that the firmament martial tyrant had mentioned, he was also very interested in the person who was very amiable. The more he interacted with these people, the more he found that the evil ghost sect, which seemed to be unforgivable in the words of the 3 emperors of the Holy City, was actually not annoying. It was especially so for that bro who kept saying, "My wife is also your wife." When Chen Guang recalled the expression on that fellow's face when he talked about such nonsense, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. The firmament martial lord, who was sitting next to him with his eyes closed, was awakened by his laughter. He opened his eyes and asked, "What's wrong? Xiao Dang, did you remember something happy?" Chen Guang smiled. "I remembered that I used to listen to other people's rumors, and had a lot of prejudices against the evil ghost sect. I suddenly find it ridiculous." Chen Guang thought that the firmament martial lord would take the opportunity to continue to criticize the evil ghost sect, but he shook his head and said, "No, there's no need to laugh at our past selves. The sages once taught us that everyone's life is divided into several stages. Each stage is a precious experience. It's our past selves that made us who we are today. Whether it's the things we've experienced in this life, or the countless lives we've experienced in the past, it's nothing special." Looking at the slightly wrinkled face of the firmament martial lord, Chen Guang felt that he was not looking at a person, but a walking philosopher. After all, he was just a martial lord living on the 6th floor. God knew how many people like him there were in the evil ghost sect. It was really a terrifying organization. In addition, he had heard them mention the sages more than once. These 2 sages should be the 2 super martial emperors that the 3 emperors of the Holy City had mentioned in the past few decades, right? It seemed that although these 2 people were not the founders of the evil ghost sect, they were the greatest masters of this sect. That's right. Now Chen Guang no longer regarded the evil ghost sect as a sect, but a sect. The diesel motorcycle sped along the mountain trail, leaving the 5th sacred city, and heading deep into the mountains. In fact, with the strength of the passengers on the train, they might be faster than the diesel locomotive by relying on their feet. However, not everyone was like Chen Guang, who had inexhaustible strength. Even the firmament martial lord could not run from the 5th holy city to the Great Snow Mountain by relying on his feet. One day later, the group changed their mode of transportation again. When he saw the small airport hidden in the deep mountains, Chen Guang was once again shocked by the power of the evil ghost faction. If he remembered correctly, planes were controlled items in the 9 great holy cities, and every plane had a record. However, this was only the 5th floor, and the evil ghost faction could get this thing. Seeing the astonished look on Chen Guang's face, the firmament martial tyrant took the initiative to introduce. "You didn't expect this, did you? These are all parts that the sacred city's technicians quietly took out from the major cities, under the guise of replacing the parts. Then we reorganized them, and pieced them together into a complete plane." Amazing! Chen Guang let out a long sigh. Although the experience of this plane was far inferior to the one he had driven from the 9th holy city, the materials used, the quality of the parts, and the endurance were far better than the plane of the 5th holy city. They say they are old parts, but in fact they are 99% new, and many of them are new parts that have not been widely used. Some of them were even taken from the higher cities, and some were made by the top engineers who joined the evil ghost faction. They are even better than the ones in the 9 holy cities. The firmament martial lord began to brag again. Chen Guang had to cooperate with him and put on a very surprised and enthusiastic look. Not only was the firmament martial lord good at playing the emotional card, but he could also always seize the opportunity to show the strength of the evil ghost faction in front of Chen Guang. The evil ghost faction was very good at talking. They played the emotional card, but they also had a lot of benefits. After flying for another half a day, under the full control of a martial venerable pilot, the smuggling plane flew thousands of kilometers, crossed mountains and rivers, and finally stopped at the center of the Great Plain on the 5th level, at the foot of the Great Snow Mountain. This was an airport runway built in a col, and it was not more than 100 meters long. It was far inferior to the airport runway in the real world, but it was just right for landing this strange small plane that was half manual and half mechanical. After all, a normal plane would not have several martial venerables running to the bottom of the plane, putting their feet on the ground, and forcibly stepping on the brakes. Previously, Chen Guang did not understand why there were several martial venerables in staff uniforms on this small plane. It was not until the plane landed that the 4 people jumped out of the cabin at the same time and stepped on the ground with their feet, wearing special wear-resistant shoes. Then, the whole plane rumbled with sparks and lightning, leaving 2 long tracks on the ground, and finally came to a stop with great difficulty. He finally understood. The firmament martial lord explained, "This is the only place in the Great Snow Mountain that is suitable for building a runway. It's a little too short." Chen Guang asked, "Why don't you build it at the foot of the Great Snow Mountain? It's not far from here." The firmament martial lord heaved a long sigh, and there was indescribable loneliness in his voice. "Although the strength of our sect is not what it used to be, this is the world of the true martial saint emperor, and it's not easy to be discovered in this snow mountain. We are still no match for the 9 sacred cities. Only by lying low and advancing step by step can we achieve great things." Chen Guang nodded without saying anything. He did not feel conflicted at the moment, but the sinister ghost sect reminded him of a certain organization in Xia in the real world. They carried out their work with great ideals, and they slowly started as underground workers. After they got off the plane, they climbed up along the rugged ice and snow road. 2 hours later, they got on a cable car that was painted white. Finally, they arrived at White City halfway up the mountain before it was getting dark. After entering White Town, Chen Guang tried to secretly mobilize his power and integrate his spiritual power with the surrounding environment. It only took him 5 minutes to find Xianqin and Wu Miaowan, who were imprisoned in the ice prison. Following behind the firmament martial tyrant, Chen Guang quietly raised his head to look at the mountain wall on the right side of Whitetown. It was a mountain wall that had been dug into the air. There were more than 10 small holes on the mountain wall, which were the windows of the ice prison. When Chen Guang fully activated his power, not only could he see the situation of the 2 with his mind's eye, but he could also hear their conversation. "It's been a whole day. Why haven't Master and the others come yet? What's going on? Even if they don't remember us, they shouldn't have stopped interrogating us, right?" This was Wu Miaowan's voice. "There's no hurry. The news of our disappearance must have reached Chen Guang's ears. He will definitely come to find us. When he sees Master, he will definitely be shocked. No matter how big the misunderstanding is, it can always be explained." This was Xianqin speaking. "I still think it's possible that it's just 2 people who look alike." "That's impossible. It's understandable that they look similar. But don't you think their temperament is exactly the same as our Master's?" Suddenly, Chen Guang's footsteps came to a halt. "Master." Chapter 1271. He didn't understand why he heard Xianqin and Wu Miaowan call him Master. The conversation between the 2 was still going on. "Do you think our masters will fight with Chen Guang? What should we do?" Wu Miaowan seemed to be talking to herself, but also seemed to be asking Xianqin. Exanchin shook her head. Little Miawan, you don't have to worry. I've read a lot of ancient books before. I asked you to read them, but you didn't read them. You still don't know what a martial sage is. Even if our master is the strongest person in the evil ghost faction, he shouldn't be a match for him at all. That Chun Guang wouldn't kill our master with a single palm, right? Wu Miawan, who was under house arrest, didn't worry about her own safety. Instead, she was worried about the culprit who kidnapped her. Exanchin speculated. It shouldn't be. He can recognize people at a glance. He definitely won't kill them. At this time, the two little girls didn't know that there were at least 3 people listening to their conversation. Chun Guang didn't say anything. He was immersed in the title of master with a blank face. As for the other 2, of course, they were Abbess Xan Yuan and Wu Qingming, who were not far from the ice prison. These 2 people are actually worried about us. Is it true? Wu Qingming sighed in bewilderment. Abbess Xan Yuan also gradually wavered. But they come from a different world, and we are from the true martial domain. This doesn't make sense. Anyway, listening to these 2 people, it seems that true martial Holy Emperor really values them. Why don't we simply use these 2 people as hostages to propose conditions to the 9th Holy City? Either they recognize the existence of the evil ghost faction, give us a fair identity, and let us expand freely, or these 2 people can't go back. Wu Qingming hesitated and said, I'm afraid it will be very difficult. True martial Holy Emperor has always been known for his decisiveness and indifference. Just these 2 people, will he let the evil ghost faction go? After all, the evil ghost faction wants to rebel against him and his 9 holy cities. The 2 of them hesitated. They were worried that even if they took the lives of the 2 women, the true martial Holy Emperor would still turn a blind eye to it. He would only come to take revenge. That would not achieve his goal. Instead, he would poke a hornet's nest. The 2 masters had no idea that after Chun Guang discovered that Exanchin and Wu Miawan were safe and sound, he shifted his attention to the area near the ice prison. As expected, he saw them. Exanchin and Wu Miawan's worries were unnecessary, because Chun Guang already knew the identities of the 2 of them. Due to the great distance between them, he wasn't able to accurately determine the cultivation realms of these 2 people. However, with his perception, he was able to tell that these 2 people shouldn't be here at all given their cultivation realms. They should be at the same level as the firmament martial tyrant, or even higher. Chun Guang speculated that the founder of the evil ghost faction might have found a loophole in the realm of true force, so he could temporarily break through the restrictions of the rules. Of course, from the words of the firmament martial tyrant, this kind of method and time limit couldn't be used for too long. Otherwise, there would be trouble in the future. Therefore, the 2 saints of the evil ghost faction shouldn't hesitate for long before they made up their minds. Since his people were here, and he could find out the location and status of Exanchin and Wu Miawan, Chun Guang wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to secretly observe the decision of the 2 saints, who were suspected to be Abbess Xan Yuan and Wu Qingming. He rubbed his chin with a complicated expression on his face. At this time, his face looked very different from his usual appearance. This was a simple design he made according to his own aesthetic standards. With his realm and skill in the realm of true force, it was too easy to use internal strength to control every muscle and skin of his body. He could change his appearance at will. When he was looking in the mirror in the hotel of the 5th holy city, Chun Guang shamelessly thought that his face was extremely handsome. Even if he recalled the images of Takeshi Kaneshiro, Wu Yanzu, Peng Yuyan, and Yu Wenla in his mind, and then copied the most perfect facial features of these 4 people, fused them into his own face, and then carefully sculpted and made various micro-adjustments to create the most handsome face in the universe, which could be said to be the pride of mankind. However, he felt that this face wasn't much better than his normal appearance. It can't be that there's a problem with my aesthetic standards, and it can't be that there's a problem with my superb disguise technique. So there's only one explanation. My face is the most handsome. Xiaodang, I'll arrange a place for you to stay first, and then I'll report your matter to the higher-ups. You should have the opportunity to meet the 2 saints by tomorrow at the latest. As for how much you'll be valued, It'll depend on your luck. The firmament martial tyrant took Chen Guang straight to the core area of White City and pointed at a white wooden door with silver lacquer words printed on the door plate and said, "It was a loud dang." The evil ghost faction must have received the firmament martial tyrant's order to prepare a room for Chen Guang in advance. Chen Guang was worried that people would mistake this place for a pawn shop and knock on the door from time to pawn something. Forget it, I'd better not complain in my heart. After all, they have good intentions. Chen Guang was puzzled and asked, "What about you, Lord Firmament?" "Me. I'll go and report to the urban management of White City about the progress of this assignment. And then I have to leave quickly." Urban management. That's right. The management of White City is called urban management. This is the system and title set by the saints. Is there a problem? No, there's no problem. Chen Guang silently gave him a thumbs up. Great job. The firmament martial tyrant said again. If I delay any longer, I'm afraid that even my cultivation will be affected. When you come to the 6th floor, you can contact me through the sex message. I don't know when I'll be able to come to the 5th floor again. However, based on my judgment, whether or not you've broken through to the martial venerable realm, you should come to the 6th floor as soon as possible. Since you're a dragon in the sky, why should you indulge in the mundane world? With your talent, you should have soared to the sky earlier. After saying this, the firmament martial tyrant waved his hand and left. Chen Guang could see everything in the entire White City with his mind's eye, so he was not in a hurry. The person he was looking for was here. If he stayed here, he could look after Xianqin and Wu Miaowan, as well as keep an eye on the so-called saints who were suspected to be dead. It didn't matter if the Protoss players and the human race players caused a ruckus outside. No one could leave without the ancient well anyway. As for his friends that might be reset in the mission, Chen Guang could only be worried about it. He had no better way to deal with it. He had already asked the 3 emperors of the Holy City to hand over the portraits of everyone. However, the appearances of the people who entered the true force domain were quite different. Not everyone had the ability to see through the players' appearances and see their souls directly like he did. Therefore, the portraits he had taken out back then could only serve as a psychological comfort. Unless they exposed themselves like Xianqin and Wu Miaowan, the possibility of finding them was extremely low. Therefore, even though he was worried, he could only let it be. After all, he was only one person. No matter how powerful he was, he didn't have thousands of clones. Becoming stronger day by day in the game, and continuously climbing up the ranks required both ability and luck. However, if one was unfortunate enough to fall, it was still fate. Even if Chen Guang had the heart to be someone's nanny, there was always a limit to his power. He could take care of things for a while, but he couldn't take care of them forever. Fortunately, this special world of jumping off the building had inexplicably pulled players from a small world into the same location. Fortunately, Shifeng was able to keep an eye on them. In the normal world of jumping off the building, he was separated from everyone else in a small world. No matter how powerful he was only one player at the moment. At most, he was just a relatively powerful player. He didn't have the ability to break through the barrier between different mission spaces. Therefore, brothers and sisters, good luck. Fortunately, with the potential that everyone had shown so far, and the super buff that came with the team effect, those who were friends with Chen Guang had far more potential than ordinary players. Of course, their survival rate was higher. When night fell, Abbess Xan Yuan and Wu Qingming finally made up their minds after much hesitation. The two of them once again appeared in the ice prison where Xianqin and Wu Miaowan were imprisoned. At this time, Xianqin and Wu Miaowan were not as shocked as they were when they first saw them. Instead, they were much calmer. Two little girls, don't think that we'll let you go just because you're pretending to be close to us. Wu Qingming was indeed a veteran. No matter what she thought, her face was still covered with a layer of frost. Abbess Xan Yuan held her horsetail whisk with both hands and stood at the side without saying a word. No one could tell what she was thinking. Wu Miaowan was also a smart person. She pointed at her face and said to Wu Qingming, "Master, do you really not recognize me?" As soon as the words left her mouth, Wu Miaowan reacted first. That's right. Her appearance was different from the real world. It would be strange if she could recognize her. Don't talk nonsense. This is a document. Write your names on it, and put a fingerprint on it. We will send someone to hand it over to Zhenwu Holy Emperor. If you want to live, listen to us obediently, Zhenwu Holy Emperor said. Wu Qingming continued to put on a cold face, and put a brocade on the table. Xian Qin looked at Abbess Xian Yuan, and let out a long sigh. Suddenly she said, Master, since you left, I've kept your teachings in mind. I've been appointed as the Deputy Minister of Heaven, and brought the Thousand Despair sect to greater heights. In the past, Chen Guang had once hosted a national darts tournament, and picked out many seedlings. Now our Thousand Despair sect and Little Miaowan's Thousand Flowers Valley are among the 8 major sections. Our reputation is not inferior to the 3 major families. As soon as Xian Qin said this, Abbess Xian Yuan and Wu Qingming were slightly stunned. After a while, they came back to their senses and looked thoughtful. Wu Miaowan added, That's right. We've finally completed the teachings left by our ancestors and carried forward the sect. The 2 masters always felt. It was as if the memories from a very, very long time ago were slowly showing signs of loosening. This memory was illusory, as if it was not in the true martial domain. However, it was unforgettable, as if it was an obsession in one of their lives. Chapter 1272. Especially the names Thousand Despair Sect and 10,000 Flowers Valley. In the hearts of Abbess Xian Huan and Wu Qingming, it was like a great bell was ringing fiercely. It sounded so familiar, but when they dug carefully in their minds, they felt distant and unfamiliar. They wanted to forget or ignore these 2 names, but they found that the moment they heard them, they were engraved in the depths of their hearts. Even if they took a wedge to pull it out, they would not be able to pull it out. Abbess Xian Huan and Wu Qingming had reincarnated in the true martial realm for many lifetimes. Although they had wasted countless years in the past, there would always be some unforgettable past. Now the 2 had finally cultivated to the level of the entire true martial realm in this life. Many memories of their previous lives had been awakened. In this life, they had seen more of the fickleness of the world and the fickleness of human nature. Because the 2 were the strongest martial emperors, they had awakened more memories. The more memories they had, the more life they had experienced. This had also created a particularly unique worldview and way of doing things for the 2. In addition, both Wu Qingming and Abbess Xian Huan had a feeling that the formation of their own personality did not seem so simple. There was a deeper reason, but the 2 could not find the answer. It was just that from time to time, like Wu Qingming, they would come up with a MLM teaching material, or a job title called city management. The 2 did not find anything strange about it. They thought it was just a sudden burst of inspiration. But this time, the 2 seemingly ordinary sect names had inexplicably caused such a big impact on them. The 2 were obviously at the top of the evil ghost sect. Even in the true martial realm, it was difficult for them to surpass their status. Their minds had long been polished to be as firm as stone. Under normal circumstances, even if some memories of their previous lives were recalled, they should not be so shaken. This was difficult to understand. Wu Miaowan and Xian Qin saw that their self-introduction seemed to have shocked the 2 masters, who looked exactly like them. They looked at each other and could not hide their joy. As long as the other party had a reaction, it proved that their guess was right. These 2 people were indeed their masters, although they did not know why they appeared here with such identities. Nor did they know why they lost their memories. It did not matter. In any case, the entire game system couldn't be judged using the old logic. What was so strange about the dead being resurrected here? The cause and effect of the matter was no longer important. What was important was the result that was happening in front of him. Wu Miaowan rolled her eyes and came up with an idea. She took the brocade and bone brush that Wu Qingming had placed on the table. Xian Qin raised her hand to stop her, thinking that she wanted an autograph. Wu Miaowan blinked and flipped the silk over again. Then, she started drawing on it at an extremely fast speed. At first glance, Xian Qin understood what she meant, and her eyes lit up. That's right, this is indeed a solution. Although there were no cameras in this world, there were no photos, and there was no way to use Photoshop to show a person's appearance. However, Wu Miaowan still had a unique skill apart from her medical skills. It was this sketch drawing that allowed her to draw a person's face vividly on the paper, with just a few strokes. In the real world, as the Deputy Minister of Heaven, Wu Miaowan did not have many opportunities to show off her drawing skills. However, she did not forget her skills. While the two masters were in a daze, Wu Miaowan used less than 2 minutes to draw Xan Qin's face on the back of the silk. On the other side, the two masters finally forced themselves to calm down. Wu Qingming glared angrily. You're already at death's door, yet you're still talking nonsense. Stop talking nonsense and sign. Although Wu Qingming's words sounded fierce, her tone and expression betrayed her completely shaken state of mind. Wait a minute. Unexpectedly, Abbess Xan Qing was the first to speak. She was staring blankly at the silk that Wu Miaowan had placed on the table. Her gaze was distant, and an even more intense memory was awakening in the depths of her mind. Although it was only a portrait drawn with simple lines, it vividly displayed Xan Qin's true appearance. Wu Qingming asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Abbess Xan Qing said with a trembling voice, "This little girl, I feel that she looks very familiar." Wu Miaowan's skill was still at the level of a master, although it was a short time, and she only had time to draw some lines. The most obvious features of Xan Qin's face were vividly outlined. It was much more realistic than the one that Chen Guang had described in the 9th Holy City, and found someone to draw it with difficulty. It was to the extent that seeing the painting was like seeing the person in person. Familiar? Let me see. Wu Qingming grabbed the silk with Xan Qin on it from the table, and squinted at it for a moment. That's impossible. I should know everyone that you know. Wu Qingming lowered her head and looked at Wu Miaowan. She was drawing quickly on the second silk. Alright, it's harder to draw myself than to draw others. It's all my fault for not being narcissistic enough in the past. I didn't look at myself in the mirror enough. After saying that, Wu Miaowan picked up the freshly drawn painting. She pulled her hands apart and raised it horizontally, facing Wu Qingming. Wu Qingming's pupils shrank instantly. This is. Who is this? Why does it give me such a familiar feeling? Wu Miaowan's eyes suddenly turned red. Master, this is the real appearance of your disciple. This is me. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Wu Qingming retreated step by step, as if she had seen a great horror. Abbess Xan Qing sighed slightly. She pulled Wu Qingming to the door of the ice prison. She never expected that the two interrogations, which were not proportional to the strength of the two sides, would end in vain. When the two left, they took away the two paintings that Wu Miaowan had drawn. It was not as if they had gained nothing. At the same time, Chen Guang, who was resting in his room, silently dispersed the martial power that he had circulated to the extreme. If Wu Qingming and Abbess Xan Qing intended to kill Xan Qin and Chen Guang would be able to rush out of the room and appear in the ice prison in less than a second. In the entire True Force domain, there was no wall that could stop him, not even the ice prison of White City. After changing into the white robe that Firmament Martial Tyrant had prepared for him, Chen Guang opened the door of the room. He planned to walk around White City to increase his knowledge. At the same time, he could pretend to spy for the 9 great holy cities. Chen Guang could not understand why the 9 great holy cities had not been able to infiltrate their spies in the long history. Wasn't his work efficiency and ability a little too low? Could it be that the 9 great holy cities were so honest that they did not have any intention of doing underground work? This was obviously impossible. However, about 2 hours later, he had a rough idea. Although it was night time, the market of White City was still bustling with people. The bustling crowd even reminded him of the snack street behind Gokyo University in the real world. What was even more inconceivable was the people in the market. The currency used here was still the holy coin, which was commonly used in the mainland. However, along the way, everyone had a smile on their face, brimming with a friendly and peaceful atmosphere. Whether it was a martial venerable or a martial monarch, even the weakest chivalrous warrior would be treated with friendliness. Chivalrous warriors could even find a martial venerable on the street at any time to ask about their martial arts insights. Unless the martial venerable was too busy, they would never be impatient. In addition, the white robe that Chen Guang was wearing also had a special symbol, indicating his martial venerable strength. Often when he passed by some shops, the shop owners would rush out of the shop enthusiastically, either to serve him a few barbecues or to treat him to a glass of good wine. Chen Guang did not spend a single coin, but he was stuffed with the dazzling array of delicious food in the market. When he returned to his room, he finally understood. It was not that the 9 great holy cities did not use spies, but in the true martial world, where everyone could be resurrected and everyone knew that they could be reincarnated, there were often no family members or normal friendships. Because of this, everyone in the true martial world could freely choose what kind of life they wanted, because there was really nothing that could force them to do something they did not want to do. Staying in the evil ghost faction, one could feel happy and also study martial arts. Even if one was a spy, entering this white city would be like throwing a meat bun at a dog. Forget it, the 9 great holy cities did not lose unjustly. Chen Guang was about to sleep, but someone knocked on the door. It was a stranger standing at the door. He bowed to Chen Guang and said, "Martial Venerable, the 2 saints have just finished their official business. They want to meet the new Martial Venerable today. Are you interested in going?" Chen Guang was puzzled and said, "It's already so late, and the saints still want to meet me?" The messenger nodded. "The 2 saints are from above. Time is tight, and they always fight for every minute. The saints' few words of advice are also beneficial to cultivation. This opportunity is really rare. Martial Venerable, please make a decision quickly." Chapter 1273. Go, why not? This is a rare opportunity. I have to go even if it's late. I'm just afraid of disturbing the sage. With a chuckle, Chen Guang left with the messenger. He was not worried that he would encounter any danger in White City. To be precise, no one or anything in the entire true martial domain could threaten him, including Yu Ting and the other gods. If the gods dared to provoke him here, they would end up like the 4 god emperors he encountered when he first arrived in the true martial domain. The only difference was his mood at the time, which could determine whether the other party's death was ugly or not. Chen Guang thought he would have to wait for a long time. He did not expect to see Abbess Xine Yuan and Wu Qingming 5 minutes later. "Come sit here. Don't be nervous." Chen Guang entered the door and looked up to see the 2 sitting on the left and right of this seemingly ordinary room. Wu Qingming greeted him with a smile. The 2 were dressed very simply. Abbess Xine Yuan wore a grayish-white monk robe. Although Wu Qingming did not change her habit of wearing flowery clothes, the material was also simple. But what really shocked Chen Guang the most was the appearance of the 2. Even if he used the mind's eye to see them clearly, the feeling and impact was still not as good as seeing them face to face. The shock in Chen Guang's heart was no less than Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan's. In fact, it was even more intense. With his cultivation in the true martial domain and his degree of integration with the entire true martial domain, it was not difficult for him to see the essence through the appearance. Although the 2 souls were perfectly integrated with the true martial domain, in Chen Guang's eyes, the 2 souls were simply incompatible with the entire true martial domain. It seemed that the 2 seniors encountered the same situation as Leng Qin. After Leng Qin died, she was reborn in the Transient Sea and founded the Radiance Pirate Group. He did not know what was going on now. The 2 seniors died tragically in reality, but they were lucky to be reborn in the true martial domain. The souls of these 2 seniors were more complete than those of the aborigines of the true martial world. Therefore, they had accumulated a lot of experience after several millions of years of reincarnation, and they had cultivated their martial power to a level that was far beyond that of other martial emperors. However, they were not like Chen Guang. They could not enjoy Chen Guang's treatment of having the entire world serve them. Hence, they could never surpass martial emperors and become true martial saints. At the same time, because they were the souls of outsiders, they were naturally compatible with the Yin Ghost sect. It was their destiny to become the saints of the evil ghost sect. This drink and peck seemed to be preordained by the heavens. As someone who had seen the Bell of Destiny, Chen Guang suddenly felt that he had gained a deeper understanding of destiny. Getting to know these two seniors was fate formed by the combination of countless coincidences. The two seniors dying in the battle with Ouyang Tianxing was also fated. They were originally martial artists. After their death, their souls were absorbed by the heavenly Holy Grail. They entered the true martial domain and became the pillars of the Yin Ghost sect. You are called Dangu, right? We have heard about you from Firmament. We are glad that you are willing to join the Yin Ghost sect. Seeing that Chen Guang was so shocked that he could not even speak, Master Xine Yuan, who was usually serious, also smiled and took the initiative to speak. Chen Guang suddenly raised his head and looked at the two masters. His eyes showed a struggle. He rarely hesitated and could not make up his mind. However, this time, he really could not do it. The Yin Ghost sect was too different from what he had imagined. For the cruel people of the true martial domain, this was the ideal place that everyone yearned for. He seemed to have become the villain, the evil boss, who wanted to destroy the beliefs of others. If he was not the true martial holy emperor, if he had not created the 9 great holy cities by himself, if he had encountered the Yin Ghost sect when he first came to the true martial domain, he would have taken the initiative to join. It could even be said that if the 9 great holy cities were already ruling forces in the true martial domain when he first came, he was more likely to become the founder of an organization like the Yin Ghost sect. Now, once he opened his mouth, he would immediately stand on the opposite side of the two seniors. The true martial holy emperor appeared in front of the 2 great saints of the Yin Ghost sect in this white city. This was equivalent to a direct declaration of war. However, this matter could not be avoided. Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan were 2 different things. Chen Guang could rescue them without anyone knowing. However, he had to ask about the whereabouts of the ancient well. Just as Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan thought, it was impossible for Chen Guang to kill the 2 of them. Back then, when the 2 of them died, he was largely responsible for them to a certain extent. So he was in a difficult position. Forget it. I will lay my cards on the table first. If I can let them know who I am, and let them recover the memories of their previous lives. That scene is really beautiful. Although Chen Guang did not know what to do, it was always good to try. Both of you, I am very happy to meet you. You can develop the Yin Ghost sect to the current situation, under the suppression of the 9 great holy cities. I have to say that I admire you. The moment Chen Guang opened his mouth, the 2 saints could immediately tell that something was different. The revered martial artist this time was different from the past. From his tone, they could hear the respect he had for the 2 of them. However, his respect was completely different from the respect of ordinary revered martial artists. There was a slightly condescending feeling, but at the same time, he seemed to be very kind to them. This kind of intimacy was very strange. It was different from the feelings of the ordinary members of the Yin Ghost sect towards the saints. It was like he was very familiar with the 2 of them, since a long time ago. Moreover, his attitude was neither servile nor overbearing. It was completely different from the worship of the Yin Ghost sect towards the strong. Chen Guang's performance made Abbess Xine Yuan and Wu Qingming a little confused. Wu Qingming grinned a little embarrassedly. It's just a little achievement. It's not worth mentioning. It's all planted by the predecessors. If it weren't for the accumulation of the Yin Ghost sect for 100,000 years, it would not be the turn of the 2 of us to carry it forward. Abbess Xine Yuan also said, yes, in the final analysis, it's the Yin Ghost sect's own philosophy that wins the hearts of the people. The elites in the true martial domain have bright eyes and recognize the purpose of the Yin Ghost sect. Chen Guang nodded. With my experience in the past 2 days, it's indeed an eye-opener. It's not something that ordinary people can do. I have also read a lot of information related to your sect before. I found that although your sect had already been rising for 100,000 years, its development was relatively slow. Until the 2 of you appeared and integrated the originally scattered Yin Ghost sect into one in just a few decades. Only then did the Yin Ghost sect grow rapidly. Looking at the history of the Yin Ghost sect for 100,000 years, I'm afraid only the founder of the sect can be compared with you two. The more Wu Qingming and Abbess Xian Yuan listened, the more they felt that something was wrong. Chen Guang's words seemed to be praising the two of them, but his words always showed a sense of equality. He didn't respect the two of them at all, like how a martial venerable looked at a legendary martial emperor. In addition, he also addressed the Yin Ghost sect as the so-called noble sect. This meant that although he had come to White Town, he did not regard himself as a member of the Yin Ghost sect at all. This was a very rare phenomenon. Not only that, even if he really thought so, shouldn't he cover up a little in front of the two of them? This time, Wu Qingming and Abbess Xian Yuan finally couldn't hold back. The atmosphere in the room suddenly changed, and the air in the room suddenly became cold. Who the hell are you? Abbess Xian Yuan's face turned cold and said calmly. Wu Qingming next to her waved her hand. Sister Xian, don't be so excited. Dang Wu, I understand what you mean. After all, this is your first time here, and you don't have enough recognition of us. We also understand that, but you can stay here for a few more days. When you have more dealings with other people, you will understand what kind of existence we are. By the way, Sister Xian, and I will leave here tomorrow at the latest. If you have any problems in cultivation, you can come to us and ask a question. Wu Qingming's words meant that she was going to ask him to leave. Chen Guang shook his head slightly. Two seniors, I really don't think you can give me any advice on martial arts. His words had a deep meaning to them. The reason he addressed them as seniors was because they were indeed seniors worthy of his respect. But with his current cultivation of martial sage in the true martial realm, if he couldn't understand it, then no one in the world could. Bang! Abbess Xian Yuan finally got angry and slapped the table. Brat, did you hear others say that we are easy to talk to? So you have some misunderstanding? Since we met today, you have been acting weird. Do you really think that we have no temper at all? This time, Wu Qingming was not interested in extinguishing the fire. She also looked at Chen Guang with a cold face. It seemed that she would take him down if there was a disagreement. Don't, two seniors, I don't mean any harm. Chen Guang quickly said. What I said is from the bottom of my heart. I really don't mean to look down on you two. As for my identity, I don't want to hide it anymore. But I have to say something first. After you know who I am, don't be too excited and calm down. I really don't mean any harm. Moreover, the fate between you two and me may be about millions of years ago. Wu Qingming frowned. Say it. I am Chen Guang. Chen Guang said while carefully paying attention to the reaction of the two. Chen Guang? Wu Qingming and Xian Yuan didn't react for a while. Chen Guang smiled. I almost forgot. In the true martial domain, very few people know my real name. People usually call me True Martial Holy Emperor. Wu Qingming and Xian Yuan didn't come back to their senses immediately, almost thinking that they had heard wrong. After a moment of silence, an amazing aura rose from the two. What? Say it again? Xian Yuan shook her horsetail whisk fiercely and glared at him. Wu Qingming's robe also fluttered, overflowing with energy. Chen Guang had no choice but to repeat it again. I have told you two to calm down, but you just don't listen? I am indeed True Martial Holy Emperor Chen Guang. Don't do it, you are not my opponent. This joke is not funny at all. Wu Qingming looked at him coldly. Abbess Xian Huan suddenly made her move. She twisted her body abruptly and raised her hand to grab Chen Guang's head. Acting all mysterious. I don't care who you are. I'll take you down first. Looking at her move, it was quite similar to the moves of the Thousand Despair sect. But this simple claw was like an antelope hanging its horn, wonderful beyond words. Her speed was extremely fast, and the cold light on her fingertips seemed to be able to pierce through space. In an instant, it changed into 9 phantoms, making people feel that it was unstoppable. Chen Guang raised his head and looked at her. Although Senior Nun Xian Yuan's expression was cold, she still held back a third of her strength. She could stop at any time. She didn't intend to kill him. But how could Chen Guang be caught by her? He sighed. I have no other way now. You two seniors don't believe me, so I can only subdue you first, and then talk to you. Chapter 1274. Next to him, Wu Qingming looked cold and said angrily, "Boastful." But before she finished speaking, her mouth opened slightly and could not be closed for a long time. The reason was very simple. The claw of Abbess Exan Huan was easily caught by the young man, who claimed to be true martial holy emperor. When he made his move, he did not have the thunderous momentum of Abbess Exan Huan. It was as easy as picking up a cup of water with his hand. But his movement was so fast. What was more terrifying was that in this seemingly simple movement, he could completely dissolve Abbess Exan Huan's claw with 70% power. After blocking Abbess Exan Huan's claw, Chen Guang did not take advantage of the victory. Instead, he looked at the two helplessly. "I have said it before. Why don't you believe me? I am Chen Guang. Chen Guang is true martial holy emperor." This time, Abbess Exan Huan and Wu Qingming believed him. However, the two did not plan to sit down and talk with Chen Guang as he expected. Instead, the atmosphere on the scene became more tense. "Forget it. Anyway, there will be a battle between us sooner or later. Since you have already come to us, we have no way to avoid it. True martial holy emperor die." Once the relationship between the enemy and them was confirmed, Wu Qingming was more decisive than Abbess Exan Huan. She roared and rushed to Chen Guang with all her strength. Abbess Exan Huan's eyes showed a look of struggle. She also clenched her teeth and continued to rush forward silently. Chen Guang thought to himself, "How can this be? Don't look at how high the fighting spirit of these two people is at this time. If I go all out, I can bet 50 cents with others. Don't think that these two seniors are the strongest martial emperors in the entire true martial domain. They are said to be the closest to martial sage. However, these two seniors can't even last 2 rounds under my hands. Without reaching my realm, it would never be possible to understand the gap between martial sage and martial emperor. One was a bird in a cage, while the other was a star in the sky. The gap between the two could not be mentioned in the same breath, and it was not something that could be made up for with just a few slogans and a little courage. However, he could not fight with the two seniors here. He could control his strength to the pinnacle, but even if he only defended himself, the force released by the two seniors could still destroy the entire White City if it spread in all directions. In addition, he also discovered that when the two of them were circulating their power, the internal energy within their bodies was not as smooth. The two of them had forcefully descended to the 5th layer with the cultivation of martial monarchs. This was a violation of the rules of the true force realm. With Chen Guang's eyesight, he could tell at a glance that the two of them wouldn't be able to go all out for long. Were they risking their lives? "I can't use my hands and feet here. I'll wait for you at the top of this snowy mountain. Don't even think about escaping. I already know where White City is." Chen Guang immediately made up his mind. He flew through the door and flew up into the sky. He stepped on the void and disappeared in a few seconds. Abbess Exan Yuan and Wu Qingming looked at each other. "Chase," the two of them said in unison. They didn't know why this young man, who claimed to be true martial holy emperor, had no intention to fight. What was he plotting? Or was he the same as the two of them? He also used an unorthodox method to forcefully descend to the 5th layer, and the restrictions he suffered were more severe than them. The strength he used to catch Abbess Exan Yuan's claw was all the strength he could exert in a short time? Was he exhausted now? This was a rare opportunity. With such thoughts, the two of them, who had been reincarnated in the true force realm for millions of years, had almost completely lost their memories of reality, decided to seize this opportunity. If they could keep the true martial holy emperor here, it would be a great advantage for the evil ghost faction. The 9 great holy cities couldn't suppress the evil ghost faction anymore. The history of the true martial world would be completely rewritten. Only one shackle would be left on the heads of the true martial world's martial artists, and that was to break the cage of this world. About half an hour later, the two's lofty ambitions were completely destroyed. After following Chen Guang to the top of the Great Snow Mountain, Chen Guang only used one palm to completely suppress their strength. Even if the two of them tried to break the shackles on their bodies and tried to perish together with each other, it was futile. The gap between the two sides was too big. "What is your purpose?" Wu Qingming, who was suppressed by Chen Guang on the ground, could only sit cross-legged. She couldn't even get up and said angrily. Abbess Xian Yuan became more talkative. If you think you can disintegrate the evil ghost faction by capturing us, stop dreaming. We have long expected such a day. Even if you don't come back, our lives will come to an end. We have already set many rules for the evil ghost faction. Even if the two of us die, the evil ghost faction will still not waver. Yes, even if we die today, our memories of this life are incomparably deep. We will still be the same in our next life. Chen Guang saw that the two of them were still stubborn, so he simply sat down. How many times do I have to say it before you will believe me? I really have no malice towards you. The two people you caught before. One is called Xian Qin, and the other is called Wu Miaowan. Think about your names again. Have you ever thought about why you give yourself such names in every life? They are indeed your most precious disciples in the past. Ignoring the two's extremely puzzled eyes, it was obvious that the two of them were wondering why he knew so clearly. Let's put it this way, the two of you. The story has to start a long time ago. Next, Chen Guang talked about the process of how he met Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan. He talked about the establishment of the Tian division, and finally talked about the battle with the evil faction led by Ouyang Tianxing. At first, the two seniors didn't believe everything he said. They only thought that he was making up a story to disintegrate their willpower. However, when Chen Guang said that the two seniors had died to save him, the two of them still looked tense. It was as if a bolt of lightning flashed in their minds. That's how it is. After the two of you died, Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan became the masters of the Thousand Extremities sect and the 10,000 Flowers Valley respectively. I also made the two deputy ministers of the Tian division. They can be regarded as the most powerful people in Jianghu besides myself. The Thousand Extremities sect and the 10,000 Flowers Valley also rapidly grew from two marginal small sections. I originally thought that this could be regarded as an explanation to the two seniors. However, now that I see the two of you being reborn here, it can be regarded as the heaven's eyes opening and giving me another chance. In fact, the two of you don't understand one thing. For me, the so-called 9 great holy cities in the true martial domain are not essential. Both of you are my seniors, and I am greatly indebted to you. You are my people. If you think about it, so what if the evil ghost faction gets the world of the true martial domain? Based on what I have seen and heard these days, I also think that the evil ghost faction is indeed more noble than the 9 great holy cities. It is indeed more helpful to the entire true martial domain. When this matter is over, I will simply disband the 9 great holy cities. In the future, the true martial domain will be handed over to the evil ghost faction. Hearing Chen Guang's words, the two seniors found it hard to believe. Is this true? Disband the 9 great holy cities? Wu Qingming asked. Chen Guang nodded. A gentleman's words cannot be taken back. I am not joking. In addition, you have also made a mistake. I have never thought of using the 9 great holy cities to enslave the true martial domain. The reason why the 9 great holy cities remained was because of many coincidences. It wasn't because I had any needs for them. In addition, I believe that you have also realized the shackles of fate in the true martial domain. This is a cage. You can't get out even if you want to. I can't do anything about it. Even I can't help you. Abbess Xan Huan said in a deep voice. This is impossible. You are the only person who has transcended. You must know how to break free from this cage. You also know that after leaving the true martial domain, you will reach a more complete world. Chen Guang said again. Haven't I already said it before? Once you leave this true martial world, you will arrive in the outside world. The two of you died in the outside world before you entered this place. The souls of the two of you are more complete. This is also the reason why the two of you are stronger than others despite being martial emperors. In addition, how can you be sure that the outside world is not a cage? Although Chen Guang was asking the two of them, he was also asking himself at the same time. If the universe where the earth is located is also a cage, then is the endless divine domain just a more advanced cage? Luli is trapped in the heavenly Holy Grail. He has become the master of this Holy Grail. It seems that his mission is to rescue Luli. But even if Luli was rescued, she would only be able to move from a smaller cage to a larger one. This thought just popped up in his mind and made him shiver all over. He quickly gathered his thoughts. "The two of you, did you understand what I said just now?" Chen Guang asked. During the conversation, he relaxed the suppression of the two's power. Abbess Xan Huan and Wu Qingming suddenly felt the pressure on them lighten. This time, they did not take the initiative to attack Chen Guang. Although the two of them were still in a daze, their rationality told them that Chen Guang was speaking the truth. Chapter 1275. Chen Guang was in a dilemma. If this continued, the two seniors would not really believe him no matter what he said. After all, the two of them had completely regarded themselves as the natives of the true martial domain. Although their memories were still somewhat fragmented, they were very fragmented and imperfect. He had to think of a way to make the two completely believe what he said. However, this kind of thing involved the most fundamental rule power of the true martial domain. Although his strength was tyrannical, and he could even integrate into the true martial domain, he could also understand the rules, and he could control the rules to a certain extent. However, it was too difficult to touch the souls of the two seniors in front of him. Moreover, they had crossed millions of years and experienced countless generations of reincarnation. Forget it. Let's stop here. I don't know if the two of you can be sure that I have no malice towards you. You see, with my strength, if I really want to harm you, I can really press the two of you to the ground with a finger. However, I, Chen Guang, swear to the heavens that with the relationship between the two of you and me, and the kindness you have shown me, even if you stab a knife into my stomach, I will not fight back. The true martial domain's mountains and rivers are fleeting clouds to me. It is not worth mentioning at all. The two of you are my seniors. The disciples that you regard as your own daughters are also my women. Chen Guang said and stopped talking. Wu Qingming immediately grasped the point. Both of the two little girls? Chen Guang thought about it. He and Xianqin were already set in stone. Although the relationship between him and Wu Miaowan was still pure for the time being, he might not be able to resist her sugar-coated bullets one day. After all, this girl was very interested in him. Well, both. Abbess Xan Yuan next to him was furious. "You brat. How can you be like this? Huh?" Before she finished her words, Abbess Xan Yuan found something strange. Those two little girls were outsiders. Although they said they were his disciples, and he seemed to have some feelings and memories that were awakening, these things were too long ago. His memories might seem real, but he shouldn't be able to accept them so quickly. But just now, when this guy said that the two little girls were his women, an inexplicable anger surged in his heart. At this moment, he actually forgot that he was almost in a captive situation, facing the legendary Zhenwu Holy Emperor, who had lived for millions of years. Since ancient times, there had been countless legends about the true martial Holy Emperor in the true martial domain. However, no matter which version it was, the Saint Emperor's image was extremely great. Moreover, he was portrayed as a talented, yet merciless person. In a sense, this wasn't wrong. The last time Chen Guang had wandered in the true martial world, he had treated the people and matters of this world as if he was playing a game. In any case, he thought that these people could be resurrected after they died. Therefore, his character was naturally different from his normal self. At that time, he was ruthless. He absolutely cut the grass without leaving the roots. However, after seeing Abbess Xan Yuan and Wu Qingming, it was just like when he was with Chu Zijin and Lu Fei. This was his real life, his real self. He didn't think that the title of Zhenwu Holy Emperor was anything special, nor would he despise the lives of these people. Then, the impression that his character left to others was not the legendary Zhenwu Holy Emperor, but an ordinary young man. Not only was he easy to talk to, but he also respected the old and loved the young. Of course, no one could ignore that this young man's personal strength was very strong. He was like a walking nuclear bomb, and he could continue to fire and explode. Now Chen Guang gave Abbess Xan Yuan this illusion. So after hearing that he ate the two girls, Abbess Xan Yuan was inexplicably angry and blurted out. However, Abbess Xan Yuan reacted halfway through her words. The young man sitting in front of her was an old monster who was famous for millions of years in the Zhenwu Jia. He was an invincible person who could suppress a city and a world with one finger. He was the Zhenwu Holy Emperor. This was very embarrassing. Wu Qingming, who was next to her, reacted quickly and quickly pulled Abbess Xan Yuan from the side, trying to smooth things over. Those two little girls can get the Zhenwu Holy Emperor's favor. They are also blessed in life. No. Listen to me. I only have a relationship with Xian Qin now. Wu Miaowan and I are still innocent. Chen Guang was not offended at all. Instead, he took the initiative to explain. It's just that the two of them are inseparable. Even if my relationship with Wu Miaowan is pure, if something happens to her, I will treat her equally. Chen Guang did not expect that because of this episode, the distance between him and the two seniors had suddenly shortened a lot. Although it was difficult to restore the memory of the two in the real world in a short time, Chen Guang found that through this face-to-face language communication, it seemed that it could really strengthen the memory awakening of the two. Chen Guang speculated that there were probably two reasons for this. One was that although millions of years had passed, the souls of the two had reincarnated and changed in this enclosed space. There was still no fundamental change in their bones. In addition, as the Zhenwu Holy Emperor, he was one of the incarnations of the Zhenwu Jie's rules. They were with him and were shrouded by the rules that spread out from his body all the time. They were closer to the origin of this world, which was also conducive to the soul recovery of the two. He decided to make a conclusion to this meeting. Two seniors, I have told you about the matter. After I go back, I will inform the three emperors of the holy city to prepare for a full connection with the evil ghost faction. From now on, the evil ghost faction no longer needs to act in the dark like before. They can appear in the open. If you are interested, I can even let the evil ghost faction become the master of the 9 great holy cities. In addition, it is somewhat inappropriate to use the word evil ghost as a name. I personally suggest to change the name. It will be easier for the people of the Zhenwu Jia to accept it. Of course, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. The 9 great holy cities have made contributions and mistakes in the past millions of years. They have indeed implemented some of the concepts that I have left in the past from the real world. However, for millions of years, they can't even make a computer or a mobile phone. This progress has made me very disappointed. It is time to find a way to change the mode of the Zhenwu Jia and become the master. Wu Qingming couldn't believe it. Is this true? I'm afraid that even if you order it, the people of the 9 great holy cities won't stop you, right? It is easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but it is difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. The 9 great holy cities have ruled the Zhenwu Jia for millions of years. I'm afraid it won't be easy to make them give up the power in their hands. Chen Guang smiled. He casually waved his palm towards the sky. After a moment, a shocking palm energy flew out. It turned into a huge dragon with a diameter of more than 100 feet and a length of 10,000 feet. It soared into the sky and bombarded the clouds in the sky. A thunderous sound came from the sky. The clouds in the sky were bombarded, and a huge hole appeared. Moonlight, which was countless times brighter than the usual radiance, fell from the sky. It fell on the peak of the great snowy mountain, where the 3 people were sitting cross-legged. Chen Guang's seemingly casual punch had the effect of poking a hole in the sky. You too. Have you forgotten what is the most effective way to speak in the Zhenwu Jia? If anyone disobeys my orders, I will kill him. Chen Guang's attitude reminded the 2 seniors of his true identity in this place. This was the Zhenwu Holy Emperor, who could make hundreds of millions of people submit to him. However, his attitude showed that he treated the 2 of them as his own people. Instead, he put the 9 great holy cities on the opposite side. Abbess Xian Qing and Wu Qingming looked at each other. They had an indescribable feeling in their hearts. Do you 2 believe me now? After saying this, Chen Guang changed into a smiling look. It was like how the people of the evil ghost faction treated their new members. Abbess Xian Qing sighed. What's the difference if you believe me or not? Chen Guang laughed. Abbess can see through it. However, there's still a long way to go. You will see my sincerity soon. Wu Qingming, who was next to him, said suspiciously, listening to you, you intend to restrain the two of us by your side? You won't. Chen Guang waved his hand again and again. Don't joke around. You two were my elders in my previous life. Even if you beat me to death, I won't have that kind of thought. I won't restrain the two of you. Instead, I plan to follow you. At the same time, I can use the cultivation methods of the Thousand Despair sect and the Thousand Flowers Valley as the foundation. Combined with the cultivation methods that you two have figured out, I can tailor the real peerless divine skill for you too. At that time, I'm afraid that dozens of martial artists like the three emperors of the Holy City will not be a match for you. It will also be more convenient for the Evil Ghost faction to connect with the 9 great holy cities. Hearing this, Wu Qingming and Abbess Xanqing looked at each other in silence. Both of them could not hide the shock in their hearts. Until now, the two of them finally completely believed that they were really important to each other. When the emotional exchange was almost over, Chen Guang finally revealed his true intention and asked another thing that he was very concerned about. By the way, I once heard from the 3 emperors of the Holy City that the Evil Ghost faction had stolen 9 ancient wells in the 9 great holy cities a year ago, right? As he said this, Chen Guang looked at the two of them expectantly. Unexpectedly, Wu Qingming and Abbess Xanqing shook their heads in confusion. Wu Qingming was the first to deny it. How is that possible? Why would we steal a well for no reason? Abbess Xingyuan also said, we have also heard about this. We used to think that the 9 great holy cities made trouble out of nothing and framed us, trying to find a reason to start a war with the Shady Ghost faction. Do you mean that it's true? In an instant, Chen Guang felt unwell. What a joke! There was such a big hole in the imperial palace of the 9th holy city. Who would be stupid enough to use such a reason to frame others for no reason? Could it be that the 3 emperors of the holy city were fooling me? Did they really dig it themselves? It can't be that ridiculous, right? Chen Guang pondered in his heart. With his eyesight, the 3 emperors of the holy city and the captain of the 13 guarding squadrons did not have the ability to lie in front of him. Then the problem was, the ancient well was really stolen, but it was really not done by the Evil Ghost faction. Then who did it? What was the purpose? Chapter 1276. Chen Guang couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out what other forces could steal the ancient well in the 9 holy cities in the true martial domain without anyone noticing except the Evil Ghost faction. The development of things was completely beyond Chen Guang's expectations. Before this, he firmly believed that finding the 2 saints of the Evil Ghost faction was equivalent to finding the ancient well. After discovering that these 2 people turned out to be Abbess Xingyuan and Wu Qingming, Chen Guang was even more convinced that this matter was settled. First of all, he had overwhelming strength. Secondly, although the 2 seniors had experienced countless reincarnations, their performance in front of Xinqin and Wu Miaowan proved that their memories of their previous lives had not been erased in these millions of years. The reason why their memories were so tenacious should be because they came in with a very complete soul, which was different from the natives of the true martial domain. Therefore, even if on the surface he seemed to have a hostile relationship with the 2, Chen Guang still had the confidence to subdue them first, and then slowly use words or other means to evoke their memories, while gradually restoring the relationship between the 2 sides. If the 2 seniors could finally recognize Xinqin and Wu Miaowan as master and disciple, it would be a happy ending for everyone. First, find the ancient well, then let the master and disciple recognize each other. In addition, continue to gather human players in the 9th holy city and send them to the ancient well in the 9th holy city. Of course, he especially needed to take care of his friends and the members of the Heaven Department. After all, the size of the ancient well seemed to be small. Maybe there was a limit to the number of people who could jump into the well every day. It was impossible to take care of millions of players. All of this seemed to be perfect. But now his plan was all messed up. It's impossible. Who can it be? Where can I find it? Chen Guang said to himself. He thought that things must not be so simple. There must be some clues that he hadn't discovered secretly controlling everything in the true martial domain. Moreover, this hidden force may be related to the source of the heavenly Holy Grail. Otherwise, it was impossible to make the ancient well in the 9 holy cities disappear at the same time a year before the mission was about to arrive. So who is messing with me? What is the purpose? What good would it get if this force obstructed the normal progress of the heavenly Holy Grail mission? When the 3 of them returned to White Town, Chen Guang was still thinking about the question in a daze. Abbess Xian Huan and Wu Qingming didn't announce his identity immediately. Once the shocking news that Zhen Wu Divine Emperor had appeared in White Town was known by others, only God knew how much trouble it would cause. However, Chen Guang, accompanied by the 2 seniors, went to the ice prison to fetch Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan. Chen Guang did not need to guard against anyone, nor did he need to worry about Abbess Xian Yuan and Wu Qingming secretly betraying him. As long as he had absolute power, he had nothing to fear. Although they had met a few times before, this was the true reunion of master and disciple. Chen Guang only watched from the side for a while, but he didn't stay to be a third wheel. He could see that although the 2 seniors were more or less reserved, they had already believed everything he said in their hearts. They had already begun to take the initiative to accept these 2 disciples from a different world. Chen Guang returned to his room, propped up the pillow high, and pondered about the current situation. All at once he was at a loss again. In his mind, he constantly deduced everything that had happened after he came to the true martial domain. From the beginning when he met the 4 gods when he first arrived until now, when he was lying in this White Town. He recalled everything in detail. He felt that he had neglected a very important thing. What was it? Chen Guang continued to think like this until the next morning, when Chen Guang met up with Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan, who had spent the entire night talking with their respective masters. He finally came to a sudden realization from Xian Qin's careless words. The situation at that time was like this. After the master and disciple recognized each other, they had a long talk all night. The 4 of them talked about life's ideals and simple meals, especially when Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan told them some of their master's habits in the real world. Only then did the 2 masters completely believe them. Everyone had their own unique habits. Some people snore when they sleep. Some people like to put vegetables in their rice. Some people like to speak with some catchphrases. And some people like to walk on the left side of their friends when they walk. These little habits were impossible to know unless one was very close and familiar with them. However, Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan's words were almost accurate, so they had no choice but to believe them. One had to know that although they had experienced countless reincarnations, many of their habits had never changed. Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan listened to their master talk about Chen Guang's plan. This was great. They immediately decided to become new members of the Shady Ghost faction and began to give their master advice. They shared their experience in managing the heavenly division in the real world. They came up with all kinds of novel ideas. Chen Guang was completely out of the picture this time. The next day, Chen Guang talked with the 2 about his various actions and experiences after entering the 9th holy city. He mentioned that he planned to find the ancient well first, and then only let the human players enter. The Protoss players would stay where they were. Unless he and all the human players jumped into the well, it would be the Protoss players' turn. However, his plan was ruined. Xian Qin suddenly said, "According to what you said, all the ancient wells in the holy city are gone. Then, the Protoss players have no reason to be so obedient, right? They even look down on us. If they have the kind of strength you said, then they have no reason to be so obedient." Wu Miaowan also said, "That's right. Even if there are too many martial emperors in the 9th holy city, and they can't cause any trouble, in the holy cities below the 7th floor, they have the emperor god leading them. There's no reason for them to restrain themselves, right?" Chen Guang's whole body suddenly froze, as if he had been hit by a spell. After a while he slapped his forehead and said, "Hey, why didn't I think of that earlier? Since the Protoss look down on the humans, they must be thinking of getting to the front no matter what. Now that the ancient well is gone, they should be more anxious than I am. But other than the news of the Protoss stirring up trouble, these people seem to have disappeared into thin air and never appeared again. Xianqin also concluded, there is only one possibility. Either they know the whereabouts of the ancient well, or they at least know why the ancient well is gone. Chen Guang nodded, that's true. It seems that we have to return to the 9th holy city as soon as possible. On the one hand, we have to arrange the handover between the evil ghost faction and the 9th holy city. On the other hand, I have to issue an order to search for the whereabouts of the Protoss in the entire true martial domain. That afternoon, Chen Guang and his team of 5 first took the fake footbrake plane of the evil ghost sect back to the 5th holy city. Then, Chen Guang led the way and dug out the top-notch machine that he had hidden outside. Then he showed Senior Nun Xian Yuan and Wu Qingming what was the real top-notch black technology. He also showed off Chen Guang's driving skills. After arriving at the 9th holy city, Chen Guang summoned the 3 emperors and the captains of the Goding 13 squadron on the spot. In addition, all the senior management of the entire 9th holy city were gathered. When Chen Guang introduced Xianqin and Wu Qingming, it caused a lot of commotion. However, the speed of Chen Guang's suppression was faster than the speed of the commotion. He still only used one palm, but this time, it blasted into the crowd in front of him. No one was injured, but more than 100 martial emperors and thousands of martial emperors could not stand. They were trembling under the power of Chen Guang's palm. Haven't you all forgotten something? If anyone questions my decision, then my habit is to change a group of obedient people. After leaving these words, Chen Guang turned around and left. The handover that shook the entire true martial domain's power structure was completed in an instant under such an incredible situation. However, the real difficulty that Chen Guang faced was in another place. In the blink of an eye, 50 years had passed, and a new city was built near the 9th holy city. This new city was filled with millions of true martial domain's natives. They were not old people, they were also outsiders. Because these players had the characteristic of maintaining their youthful looks and not aging, the outsiders gradually began to refer to them as Unaged. In the past 50 years, human players came to the 9th holy city in various ways, but everyone was like passengers stranded in the airport with nowhere to go. Fortunately, people did not age in this world. Although they did not know what had happened, at least they did not have to worry about dying of old age here. The large number of human players had brought a lot of real changes to the true martial domain. The knowledge brought by millions of human elites had changed the true martial domain crazily in the past 50 years, making the technological progress of this world even faster than the previous millions of years. Chen Guang was bored to death as he fiddled with the newly developed true martial pad. His mind was in a daze. 50 years had passed, but he couldn't find any movement of the Protoss. These people seemed to have disappeared into thin air. He called Luli but did not get a response. These bastards, could it be that they hid the ancient well and secretly jumped away? Chapter 1277. Why are you in a daze? Don't you have a lecture in the afternoon? Why? Do you want to slack off? While Chen Guang was in a daze, someone gently touched the back of his head, and a sweet-sounding voice resounded from his back. Chen Guang turned around. Why are you here? Aren't you going to have a concert today? Why don't you hurry up and prepare? It was Jiang Yage who appeared behind Chen Guang. Most of his friends and relatives who had become players had gathered in the 9th holy city in the past 50 years. Only Wen, who was immersed in the world of martial arts in the true martial domain, hadn't returned. However, she still asked someone to bring him a letter. The main idea was that she didn't need to worry. She intended to learn the way of the true martial holy emperor and walk the path of the holy emperor. She wanted to learn and analyze all kinds of martial arts in the true martial domain by herself. Chen Guang was helpless at that time. There were 400,000 kinds of martial arts. How could he have the time to slowly learn them? Besides, isn't it ready-made and installed in my own head? It's better for you to stay by my side, rather than wasting your unlimited energy to search for it. With my current hand speed, I can arrange hundreds of clerks to give you dozens of secret books every day. You won't be able to finish reading them. However, he just thought about it. Although the mobile phone had been developed, Wenwen obviously didn't intend to contact Chen Guang. She was the only one who brought the messages. Chen Guang couldn't find her at all. Of course, she knew that staying by Chen Guang's side was a shortcut. However, Wenwen obviously couldn't accept such an arrangement with her character. If she didn't have the strongest martial heart, she wouldn't have become the #1 genius in China before the appearance of Chen Guang. You want me to be Chen Guang's subordinate? Sorry, even if you're the true martial holy emperor, you can't. On the other side, Jiang Yage curled her lips. I don't even know how many times I've sung. It doesn't matter whether I practice or not. Chen Guang shrugged. It's your fault for not being able to write new songs. Jiang Yage rolled her eyes helplessly. What can I do? It wasn't just me and Sister Shuriwe. We also contacted many people who knew how to compose songs and lyrics in the real world. But for some reason, the things that were easy for us to do in the past suddenly became difficult. No matter how we write it, even if we manage to write it, we won't be able to satisfy ourselves. Then we won't be able to show it to others. Chen Guang had also heard about this phenomenon from Jiang Yage. The human players who came here were the elites of the elites. Whether it was their routine work or their creativity, they should be considered the best of the best. However, the fact was that the scientific and technological level of the true martial world had reached a level very close to that of the real world, by relying on the joint efforts of millions of people over the past 50 years. However, the pace of scientific and technological progress had suddenly come to a halt since 5 years ago. It was as if everyone had suddenly lost their creativity. But now, Chen Guang gradually discovered that this creativity wasn't suddenly lost. It was never there from the beginning. Although the true martial domain had used 50 years to go through the technological progress of the earth for hundreds of years, in the end, it was the result of these human elites sharing the existing knowledge. At this point, if they wanted to go further, they would have to go beyond the current scope of the earth. The people were still the same people. Even if these people held important positions on the earth, they could still contribute to the progress of the humans on the earth. But in the true martial domain, it was as if everyone's hands and feet were tied by invisible shackles. If I can't write it, then forget it. Anyway, I have nothing to do. I also tried to learn martial arts, but it seems that there is no progress. I might as well count the days and calculate when I can spend the reward points. Jiang Yage sighed again. She didn't dawdle with Chen Guang anymore. She said goodbye and left. Not long after, Tang Ying appeared again. She was very straightforward. The samples are used up again. Hurry up, give me another round. Chen Guang's face was bitter. Didn't I give you one yesterday? How come it's gone so fast? Tang Ying chuckled. Don't we have enough manpower and equipment now? Seeing that the long march of 10,000 li was only one breath away, I had to go all out in one spurt of energy. Same old rules, I'll help you. Chen Guang stood up and walked to the bedroom. Come on, come on. He couldn't help but feel depressed. For any normal man, it was a very happy thing for Tang Ying to do that, and finally do that. But after 50 years, Sister Tang Ying would only do it herself every time. She didn't really do it. What was fun at the beginning became boring and tedious in the end. Chen Guang felt strange. What kind of restraint was it that made Tang Ying persist in doing this for 50 years? And yet she never had a strong desire to take it one step further. Sister Tang Ying, what's the point of doing this research now that we're in this place? Moreover, even if you really can completely decipher my genes here, this body of mine right now isn't completely the same as my real body. Moreover, I'm afraid you won't be able to bring the results out, right? When the storm subsided, Chen Guang complained. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Others needed creativity to do things. Although Tang Ying's research seemed to be very high-end, it was ultimately a tedious and repetitive task of deciphering the finished product. However, he felt that Tang Ying's actions were superfluous and meaningless. With a firm expression, Tang Ying said, "You can't say that. According to my comparison, you might look different from the real world in terms of appearance and figure, but the DNA at the bottom of your body is completely the same. Also, even if you can't bring it out, at least you've completed a complete analysis. This is a magnificent feat in human history. The Human Genome Project started in the 1980s, and until now, it hasn't reached 100% completion. Also, even if I can't bring the data out, don't I still remember a lot of it in my brain? Technology is based on people, and the most important thing is me, understand? Yes, I understand. Then I'll leave first, I'm busy over there. Oh, by the way, if Huitong comes looking for you, don't tell her that I'm here again. Otherwise, she'll keep saying that I'm going to squeeze you dry. Remember that. Tang Ying waved her hand and disappeared in a flash. After a while, Wu Tong, who was wearing a police uniform, came. Chen Guang, this is the recent public security report of the 9th Sacred City and the adjacent city. Take a look. There's an evil sect called the Heavenly Destruction Sect outside the city. I originally wanted to ask Senior Xian and Senior Wu for help to encircle and suppress them, but they told me to come to you to get a document first. Perhaps Wu Tong's illness wasn't light, but she couldn't stay idle. On one hand, she had some skills after coming to the true martial world. On the other hand, she had a knack for public security management. Of course, the most important thing was her relationship with Chen Guang. She had taken on the responsibility of public security management in the 9th layer of the true martial world. Chen Guang didn't look at the document that Wu Tong handed to him and quickly signed it. Wu Tong didn't hesitate and kissed him on the cheek. Then she left happily. Looking at Wu Tong's silhouette, the awkward feeling in Chen Guang's heart grew stronger. It seemed that everyone in the true martial domain had fallen into a very mysterious state. Although they seemed to have lost their creativity, everyone seemed to be very immersed in their own situation. But what was even more strange was that after 50 years, everything seemed to be developing. But the relationship between him and the people around him seemed to be the same as 50 years ago, or the state before he entered the Heavenly Holy Grail. In addition, it was reasonable to say that most people had friends and relatives in the outside world. 50 years was enough for a young man to become a white-haired old man. But no one missed their family and friends in the outside world. Even when they were chatting, they were still very calm, and their hearts were like still water. It seemed as if everything had stopped a day ago, but in fact 50 years had passed. It seemed as if everyone's emotions were frozen. Chapter 1278. In terms of time, 50 years had passed. But in terms of the relationship between people, everything seemed like it had happened yesterday. Nothing had changed and nothing had happened. The world in front of him had been turned upside down. It was changing with each passing day. However, people's hearts were inexplicably stuck in the past. This mysterious feeling made Chen Guang's mind feel very abrupt and puzzled. However, he was the only one who was sober at this time. He had mentioned this problem to others more than once. However, whether it was Wu Tong who was obsessed with being a sheriff, Tang Ying who was obsessed with her DNA, Zhuo Jingxi who brought photocatalysis and environmental protection from the real world to the real martial domain, or of course, Lin Jingwei and Sun Xiaoxuan, who were his classmates in the real world. None of them took his vigilance seriously. Now they all found their own roles in the real martial domain and enjoyed it. Chen Guang even bumped into someone he didn't want to bump into. Brother Bai Hua had also come to the true martial world. Fortunately, he didn't mention anything about Chen Yu anymore. Instead, he focused his attention on establishing and managing his own team in the true martial world. In addition, Bai Hua also managed a company, and this company was involved in the development of energy sources in the true martial world. Every human player from the real world had inexplicably found their own position in the real martial domain. It seemed that these 50 years were the continuation of their lives in the real world. However, Chen Guang knew that it was just like how he had cultivated in the cup realm. If a person's thoughts were frozen and emotions were sealed, even if they lived for tens of thousands of years, it would only be an instant, and it wouldn't have any meaning. After a long sigh, Chen Guang stood up. He looked for the captain of the 13th Guarding Squadron and asked him to summon Abbess Xing Yuan, Senior Wu Qingming, and the 3 emperors of the Holy City to the palace. He had something to say. After waiting for a while, everyone put down their work and rushed into the palace. Although the power structure of the entire true martial world had smoothly transitioned from the 9 great holy cities to the former evil ghost faction and the current heroic spirit palace, Chen Guang's status as the true martial holy emperor hadn't changed or been shaken. This verified what he had once said. He had never relied on his subordinates to enslave anyone in the true martial world for everything he had obtained. He could only rely on one thing, and that was his own absolute strength. There's still nothing? At the same time, Chen Guang looked at the dozens of people seated below with his head in a mess. Currently, in the 9th holy city, aside from the 2 seniors and the 3 emperors, even the guiding 13 squadrons had changed 6 captains. As for the other positions, they had changed again and again. The reason was simple. When Chen Guang worked here, most of the time, he was clear about rewards and punishments. Even the entire true martial world couldn't find a group of people for 50 years. Moreover, they were the divine race with very clear characteristics and goals. This was either a collusion between the inside and the outside, or the subordinates didn't work hard and didn't work hard. Chen Guang didn't punish people for these things. Some people even protested because they were dissatisfied with Chen Guang, always making them do these meaningless things. Of course, the final result was that these people were stripped of all their power on the spot. Reporting to Lord Holy Emperor, a few days ago, the inspection team gathered the search teams of the major cities and held an online conference. Everyone exchanged information. There were some abnormal situations, but we eliminated all of them after investigating them one by one. They weren't the divine race that Lord Holy Emperor had mentioned. Most of them were evil demons stirring up trouble, or some small beasts that had cultivated internal power and opened their spiritual wisdom. An old man came out from the crowd and said with his head bowed. This old man looked about 60 or 70 years old, but in fact, he was more than 1,000 years old. He was originally a wild crane with no fixed abode, until the evil ghost faction entered the 9 holy cities. After the birth of the Martyr's Palace, he left the mountain and embarked on an official career because of the recognition of the Martyr's Palace. In these years, this old man had done a lot of work for the Martyr's Palace. He managed the internal affairs in an orderly manner and coordinated the relationship between the old man and the natives of the true martial world. He was also in charge of the search for the divine race, but there was no progress. He couldn't do anything about it. Chen Guang rubbed his eyebrows. He felt that if he continued to frown like this, his eyebrows would become knotted. Forget it. If there's nothing else, you can leave. He waved his hand. At this time, Chen Guang looked like an incapable ruler in ancient times. He would summon his ministers just because he didn't agree with them. Then he would dismiss them. Lord Holy Emperor, this subordinate has another matter to report. A middle-aged martial artist walked out from the crowd. Chen Guang looked down. He remembered this person. If one were to understand his profession in modern terms, he would probably be the Minister of Mines. Chen Guang had never asked him about these matters. If there was a ranking of the most useless person in the true martial world, he would probably be the champion without any suspense. Chen Guang decisively refused. You don't need to report these matters to me. You can do as you see fit. Nowadays, the mining technology of the true martial world was close to that of the real world. Since the true martial world was vast and rich in resources, the workload of the mining department was terrifying. There were new mines being excavated almost every day. Chen Guang had been diligent for a short period of time before. However, he didn't last 3 days before he was dizzy from all kinds of documents piled up on his desk. Now that this old man wanted to find trouble for him, he decisively pushed the responsibility away. The Minister of Mines also understood his habits and explained, Lord Holy Emperor, this subordinate doesn't want to talk about the mines. A few days ago, the exploration team, led by Martial Emperor Chang Feng, went to the highest peak. They seem to have seen the woman you asked us to pay attention to at the foot of the mountain. Chen Guang's eyes lit up. Really? Where is she? Tell me what's going on. Since a long time ago, he was not satisfied with only one-way communication with Wenwen. In addition to ordering his subordinates to search for the Protoss, he did order them to report to him immediately if they found any trace of Wenwen. However, he had not seen Wenwen in the true martial world. He didn't know what her appearance had changed. Every time she asked someone to bring a letter, she would hide her face. Therefore, he could only briefly describe Wenwen's characteristics to others. She had the temperament of an old man, was relatively cold, and was addicted to various martial arts. This was the best he could do. Unexpectedly, the security officers of countless cities found nothing. On the contrary, the exploration team found Wenwen's whereabouts. After getting the others to leave, Chen Guang called the mining department head to the backyard and asked about the matter. Only then did he understand what was going on. The leader, Martial Emperor Changfeng, was a rising martial arts master. He was young but powerful, and had a rare warm-hearted heart. He joined the Martyr's Palace's mining department more than 10 years ago, and became the leader of the mining department's strongest exploration team. After all, the true martial world was different from Earth. There were many dangerous places. Without a certain level of strength, it was impossible to reach these places. For example, at the foot of the highest peak that Martial Emperor Changfeng went to, the yin and yang pressure was extremely strong. Without the strength of a martial emperor, one could not even approach it. At that time, according to a senior expert's notes, we speculated that there might be a large amount of rare earth ores in the terminating Thought Valley to the east of the highest peak. Thus, Martial Emperor Changfeng decided to lead his team to investigate. Not long after they arrived, they found a lot of rare earth ores in the terminating Thought Valley. They originally intended to continue exploring, but they were blocked by two strange beasts that had cultivated into demons. These two strange beasts seemed to have spiritual intelligence and were very powerful. Either one of them would not be at a disadvantage against Martial Emperor Changfeng. They encountered two strange beasts at the same time, but Martial Emperor Changfeng was the only one in the team. At that time, the situation was extremely critical. If it wasn't for that veiled woman in green clothes lending a helping hand and helping Changfeng block one of the strange beasts, they would have probably been killed. Later on, Martial Emperor asked for her name, but she avoided it and repeatedly emphasized not to tell others that she was here. Martial Emperor thought that she was very similar to the person you told us to keep an eye out for. So he stopped exploring deeper into the terminating Thought Valley and returned immediately. He asked me to report to you. Chen Guang was shocked by the mining department head's description. According to this theory, if that person was Wenwen, did that not mean that she had become a martial supreme in 50 years? Invite Martial Emperor Changfeng here. I want to talk to him. He's outside the main hall. After a while, Chen Guang met Martial Emperor Changfeng, who was more interested in mining than martial arts. After a detailed inquiry, Chen Guang came to a conclusion based on the other party's description. This mysterious girl was Wenwen. It was really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find it by chance. I thought you could hide until the end of time. But didn't you still give yourself away? At the end, Martial Emperor Changfeng waved his hand in annoyance. When I saw that she wanted to go in alone, I tried to persuade her not to take the risk, but she didn't listen to me. She only said that it was fine, and then she left without looking back. It's fine. Since her strength is about the same as yours, it's normal that you couldn't stop her. Alright, I already know about this. Thank you. After Martial Emperor Changfeng left, Chen Guang thought that since Wenwen was still in the terminating Thought Valley, should he make a trip there? To others, it was a dangerous place, but to him, it was a piece of flat land. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well take a look. Who knows, he might be able to catch her in the act. He stood up and looked into the distance. It was the highest peak. Right at this moment, a beam of light suddenly shot up into the sky from the foot of the highest peak and pierced through the sky. The beam of light was more than 1,000 miles wide, and it was colorful and dazzling. It lasted for a few seconds before it suddenly disappeared. After a while, the ground under Chen Guang's feet began to shake as if there was an earthquake. The ninth sacred city was in chaos. Fortunately, most of the residents in the city were skilled, and the materials used to build the buildings were strong enough. It only shook, but the buildings did not collapse. The shaking lasted for a few minutes before it calmed down. After waiting for more than half an hour, a thunderous rumble came from afar. A few minutes later, the geologist in the palace hurried over. "Holy Emperor, we've determined the location of the earthquake's source. It's the east side of the highest peak. We're asking experts from the old ones to help calculate the magnitude, but the preliminary estimate is that it should be more than 9. Chen Guang immediately asked, "Is it the terminating Thought Valley?" The geologist was stunned at first, but he immediately nodded. "We speculate that it's near the terminating Thought Valley, but we haven't confirmed it yet." Chen Guang walked out and shouted, "Prepare a plane for me. I want to go to the terminating Thought Valley." He had heard of a theory in real life. While waiting for the bus, if the bus didn't arrive after a long time, he would light a cigarette. But the cigarette wouldn't last more than 2 or 3 puffs before the bus would arrive. Then, he could only bitterly throw away the cigarette that he had only smoked for 2 puffs. If one had a wife and children, one should never play ladder games or ranked games while his wife and children were not asleep. Even if one game only lasted 15 minutes, something would definitely happen to one. At that moment, there were only 2 choices. One was to quarrel with his wife, and the other was to cheat his teammates and get reported. In short, if something bad could happen, no matter how small the possibility, it would definitely happen. This was called Murphy's Law. At that moment, Chen Guang believed in this theory a little. The strange beam of light, the terrifying earthquake that could still be felt across thousands of miles. And Wenwen was in the terminating Thought Valley. When these 3 factors were in place, the place where the anomaly would happen would definitely be in the terminating Thought Valley, and Wenwen would definitely be involved. Chapter 1279. From the moment Chen Guang decided to go out to the moment, he piloted the plane alone and took off from the Imperial City Airport. It took less than 15 minutes. The top-notch plane that he had once used had long been eliminated. Now his personal plane had been upgraded and was the pinnacle of the perfect combination of modern technology and internal martial arts. This plane had the technological feel of a modern fighter plane, but the material used was the ultra-strong and lightweight bone plate of a strange beast that could not be found on Earth. The surface was smeared with the oil of a giant fish and a strange beast that was extracted from nature. Apart from that, its power system also combined the effects of fuel and a martial artist's internal strength. Its flying speed was not something that an ordinary plane on Earth could compare to. With Chen Guang's skills, he could inject his internal strength without stopping and reach any place in the true martial realm. From the time the plane took off to the time he arrived at the foot of the highest peak, it only took about 10 to 20 minutes. After arriving here, he could not continue piloting the plane. The air was filled with turbulence at any time, and the extremely terrifying yin and yang qi turbulence would also cause a heavy burden on the mechanical parts. In short, Chen Guang used the limits of his mechanical endurance to perform a fancy vertical landing and landed safely. Just like the last time, after blasting a hole in the ground with his palm, he conveniently buried the plane. Chen Guang leaped and disappeared into the forest. The terrifying earthquake just now had caused severe damage to the surrounding environment. There were giant trees lying on the ground everywhere, and there were even a few fresh cracks that emitted the smell of soil on the ground from time to time. Broken tree roots stretched out randomly in the cracks, and there were a few insects crawling up and down from the tree roots from time to time, looking confused and empty. However, Chen Guang did not fly through the air, but chose to fly on the ground. The closer he got to the terminating Thought Valley, the more he had an indescribable strong feeling. The air seemed to be filled with a power that was completely different from yin and yang qi. It could even prevent his mental power from extending forward. Under normal circumstances, with his skills and the realm of the true martial realm, he only needed to stand far away from the terminating Thought Valley, and he would be able to see everything inside with just a thought. But now, no matter how hard he tried to circulate his mental cultivation technique and crazily extended his mental energy, which was enough to suppress tens of millions of people in a city, he could only see a blur in his mind's eye. About half an hour later, with Chun Guang's speed, he had traversed at least 100 miles and finally stood in front of the entrance of the terminating Thought Valley. Looking up, there were two tall mountains on both sides that pierced through the clouds. It was hard to tell how high they were. The entrance was about a few kilometers wide. There should have been dense trees growing on both sides, but at this time, they had all fallen crookedly to the ground. Not only that, Chun Guang also saw many broken tree trunks. The cuts were very smooth, but the upper halves had mysteriously disappeared. Chun Guang looked around and saw that the broken tree trunks were distributed in a regular pattern. They were basically in the shape of a ray, extending from the inside all the way to the outside. Walking in front of a tree stump, Chun Guang lowered his head to size it up. Then he reached out to touch the fracture. There was still a faint heat on it, but the strange thing was that there were no signs of burning on the fracture. There was only one explanation for this. At the same time that the pillar of light soared into the sky, an extremely powerful heat wave spread out from within in the form of a ray, sweeping through the area and cutting off all the trees. It even evaporated the upper half of the broken tree out of thin air. He then looked at the direction of the tree stump's fracture. Although it looked crooked, it was only because the earthquake had changed the terrain. In fact, the original direction of the fracture should be completely the same, and all the sections should be completely parallel. In that case, the time when the heat wave rushed out should have been before the earthquake. There must be something extraordinary in the terminating Thought Valley. Perhaps Wenwen had discovered it, which was why such an unforeseen event had occurred. Chun Guang cried out in his heart. Could it be that Wenwen was already dead? Thinking of this, he immediately sped up his pace. Everyone else was protected by him and lived a peaceful life. If Wenwen, who was the most talented, was the first to die in this game, it would be embarrassing if word got out, and he would not be able to explain himself. When he found her in the real world, she became different from him because her character in the game had been reset. That would be a great disservice to Wenwen's identity and status as the second strongest player in the pugilistic world. Suddenly, Chun Guang stopped in his tracks. Traces of a battle appeared in front of him. There were fallen tree trunks everywhere, but there was no pattern to the position where they had fallen. From time to time, a few huge footprints would appear on the ground, and the shape of the footprints looked like 4 sharp claws. There was also a long ravine that covered the ground. The ravine was about 3 to 4 meters wide, as if it had been plowed by something. According to what Martial Emperor Chongfeng had said, this was probably where the exploration team had fought alongside Wenwen. There were 2 completely different kinds of marks on the ground. One of them looked like a ferocious tiger, but it was as tall as an elephant. The other was caused by a huge snake-like monster that had slithered across the ground. Now that he saw it, if it was true, the scene back then must have been very tragic. Apart from this, Martial Emperor Chongfeng had said that they had only managed to repel these 2 mutated beasts and had not killed them. This showed how powerful these 2 mutated beasts were. Chun Guang could not help but feel that Wenwen had encountered 2 such troublesome mutated beasts not far from the entrance of the end of Thought Valley. If she had been thinking normally, she would have stopped on the spot and returned. According to the geological report, the end of Thought Valley was thousands of kilometers deep. The deeper one went, the colder and wetter it became. There were weeds everywhere, and mutated beasts were everywhere. The powerful mutated beasts were even stronger than regular martial emperors. Even martial emperors like the Holy City's 3 emperors might not be able to take them down. Not only that, but there were no other special products in the end of Thought Valley. Apart from these mutated beasts, there were only some swamps. There were no natural treasures that were beneficial for martial arts. Hence, in the past countless years, only a few bored martial emperors would venture deep into the end of Thought Valley. Most of them would return empty-handed. Many of them even lost their lives in there. So there were even fewer people who went. It was only with the advancement of technology in recent years that martial Emperor Changfeng led a team of explorers to venture deep for the purpose of mining. In the end, they ended up with nothing. Wenwen's actions were very strange. Could she have discovered something? It was impossible for her to do such a meaningless thing. She must have discovered something, which drove her to venture deeper. In that case, what was it that attracted her to enter the depths of the end of Thought Valley despite the danger? With this thought in mind, Chen Guang continued to move forward at a brisk pace. Just like what was recorded in the records, the deeper one went into the end of Thought Valley, the denser the trees became. The soil on the ground became softer as well. A faint burnt smell started to spread in the air. Occasionally, 2 or 3 mutated beasts would appear in the forest after smelling Chen Guang's scent. There were big and small mutated beasts. There were strange apes that stood on 2 feet, ghost wolves with white fur on their ears and blue flames on their paws, and giant bears that were dozens of feet tall. However, all the mutated beasts were intelligent. At first, they came after smelling a human, but when they got closer to Chen Guang, they were frightened by the dangerous aura that surged out of his body and fled in a panic. Normally, Chen Guang would be interested in catching a few mutated beasts to study them. However, now was not the time to do so. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and turned his head to look below him. There was a rag on the ground. Chen Guang bent down and picked up the rag. It was cold to the touch. This was a piece of green cloth made of a very special material. It was extremely tough and transparent. It was a high-quality piece of cloth that was specially used to make clothes for martial artists. 1 meter of it cost several million holy coins. If he remembered correctly, Martial Emperor Changfeng had once said that Wenwen wore green clothes. In that case, this cloth had most likely fallen from Wenwen's body. Judging from its shape, it should be part of her sleeves. She had experienced a fierce battle here, and it was extremely bitter. Even her sleeves had been torn off. From there, sparse footprints gradually appeared on the ground, leading all the way inside. Observing the shape of these footprints, it seemed that there was more than one person, and they were very messy. Although the strong earthquake had changed the terrain significantly, and many parts of the ground had been overturned, Chen Guang could always find 1 or several deep or shallow footprints every few hundred meters. These footprints were scattered randomly on the soft ground of the terminating Thought Valley. These footprints looked very new, and seemed to have been made not long ago, no more than a week ago at most. It happened to coincide with the time when Martial Emperor Changfeng and his group met Wenwen. Wenwen had at least the strength of a martial emperor, and the opponent who could fight with her must be stronger than a martial emperor. If they were traveling normally, it would be impossible to leave these footprints. In that case, there was only one possibility. Both parties were fighting while heading inside, but it was unknown who was chasing who. Chen Guang speculated that Wenwen was being chased by someone. Who was it? Who set up an ambush in this place? What was their motive? What did Wenwen find? The doubts in Chen Guang's heart grew. Unknowingly, he had been running inside for a whole day and night. He had reached the deepest part of the terminating Thought Valley. Apart from the martial emperor, who drew the map of the terminating Thought Valley, no one else could reach this place. However, Chen Guang suddenly saw the wreckage of a building on the side of the road. He frowned even more after he got closer to take a closer look. Judging from the materials and architectural style of these collapsed buildings, they were clearly built in the past few decades. Judging from the scale of the buildings, the wreckage covered an area of more than an acre, and at least a few dozen people could have lived in them. However, although the buildings here were completely damaged, there were no corpses. The doubts in Chen Guang's heart grew. If it wasn't the evil ghost faction, he really couldn't think of anyone who would have the need to live in this dark, damp, cold, and infested place with strange beasts. Nowadays, the whole true martial domain could be said to be prosperous and peaceful. The people lived and worked in peace and contentment. There were fewer killings in Jianghu than before. After the expansion of the 9th holy city, it could accommodate hundreds of millions of people. In addition to the elderly, the adjacent city outside could also accommodate tens of millions of martial artists. Although the concentration of yin and yang qi in the holy city was not as good as here, It was better in that it was neutral and peaceful. It would be more beneficial if one practiced internal strength. Chen Guang couldn't think of any reason. Why would one live in this place where even birds wouldn't poop? Why would they build these broken houses? Chen Guang walked 2 more rounds in the wreckage and suddenly made a surprising discovery. There were no traces of electric wires in these buildings. The more he checked, the more puzzled he became. Although only 50 years had passed, the use of electric current had already been popularized in the true martial domain. It had replaced the past backward facilities in many aspects. Nowadays, there were hundreds of billions of people in the true martial domain. Almost everyone knew about the convenience of using electricity. These houses had been built in the last few decades. Moreover, the materials used were relatively new. Even the floors were made of self-leveling cement, which had become popular in the last 10 years. So, it was even more necessary to build houses in this cold and gloomy place with electricity. It must be known that it was very convenient to generate electricity in the true martial domain. It could be arranged for a person who practiced internal strength to squat there and pedal a sports bike to generate the power of a generator. However, there were no electric wires here. There weren't any electrical facilities either. Could it be that the people who lived here didn't need electricity to produce light and heat? Could they create a comfortable environment in this place? Although most of these houses had collapsed, many of the wreckage looked very beautiful. In particular, there were some exquisitely crafted Roman reliefs on them. These reliefs indicated that the original owner of this place was very particular. Suddenly, an idea flashed in Chen Guang's mind. He finally thought of the answer. The people who lived here in the last few decades were not used to using electricity. However, they were very particular about it. So there was only one option left, the divine race. Picking up a lamp-like thing from the ground, a look of understanding appeared on Chen Guang's face. This lamp holder was completely different from ordinary oil lamps. There was no wick inside. The bottom was not hollow, so it couldn't be filled with oil. However, this thing looked like a wall lamp hanging on the wall. So, the energy source of this thing must be the divine power of the divine race. It was really like wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, but finding it by chance without even looking for it. Chapter 1280. He continued to rummage around for a few more minutes. He found a lot of daily necessities, which further confirmed his guess. The residents here were definitely not normal humans. Their living habits were completely different from the warriors in the real force domain. It was even more impossible for them to be modern people who had come here through the game. In the end, he found 2 or 3 pearls on the ground. There was a small amount of divine power stored in them, which confirmed Chen Guang's guess. It was very likely that these beads were bestowed upon the lesser gods by the higher gods to help them recover their divine power. The divine power inside was too shabby. Chen Guang didn't care about it at all. He threw it on the ground and continued to go deeper without looking back. He didn't plan to go back and call for help. Even if all the Protoss were gathered here, Chen Guang didn't think they could stop him in the real force domain. The buildings that had been completely destroyed in the earthquake should have been the Protoss outpost. The Protoss living here shouldn't be too high-leveled. They shouldn't be much different from the small fries he had encountered in the massacre world, except for Yu Ting and Weseni. Everything was just as he had guessed. The deeper he went, the more damaged buildings he saw. The Protoss had not been hiding here for a long time. It was likely that all the Protoss players who had joined the game had gathered here. Their evacuation seemed to be very hasty. Many things that Chen Guang thought were very useful to the Protoss were not taken away. Chen Guang speculated that the Protoss evacuation must have something to do with the Pillar of Light and the earthquake. Previously, he was too far away. Although the Pillar of Light was extremely thick, he couldn't see it clearly. But now that Chen Guang thought about it carefully, he felt that there seemed to be 1 or 2 black shadows flashing in the Pillar of Light. At that time, he didn't care about these details. But now that he thought about it carefully, Chen Guang had a vague feeling that something was wrong. Maybe those black shadows were the Protoss that had rushed into the sky. This situation was very bad. In other words, A mysterious force had stolen the ancient well without their knowledge, and now it had opened a back door for the Protoss, allowing them to leave this place through an unorthodox method. Chen Guang recalled all kinds of strange things that he had seen in the past 50 years. Could it be that the power that was secretly controlling the progress of the game of jumping off the building was planning to trap me in the true martial world forever? Thinking of this, Chen Guang almost broke out in a cold sweat. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. Up until now, he had only opened 2 large-scale cup worlds, the transient sea and the true martial domain. Although he was very used to living in the instantaneous sea, it was after all an endless ocean, as far as the eye could see. It was 70 to 80% similar to the famous post-apocalyptic movie, Future Waterworld, just that the scale was many times larger. His good friends and the ordinary humans who were implicated might find it interesting at first, but after a long time, they would definitely feel uncomfortable and miss the land world. But the true martial domain was different. Not only was it vast, but it was also filled with beautiful scenery of famous mountains and rivers. In addition, the lakes in the true martial domain were extremely large, and the area of the larger lakes was even larger than the sum of the 4 oceans on the earth. First, they would subtly influence all the human players to adapt to this place. Using the ancient saying, they would enter a state of indulgence. Then, after they had completed the transformation of the entire world in 50 years, the next step would be to look for the famous mountains, travel all over the Zhenwujia, and see the world. Considering the size of the true martial domain, and the size and mobility of humans, it would be impossible to thoroughly see the true martial domain without tens of millions of years. Even Chen Guang had a faint feeling that the peak of the true martial domain used to be the edge of the true martial domain. He himself used to stand on the peak, but when he looked at the peak from time to time, he would occasionally see a shadow behind the peak. At that time, Chen Guang didn't think much of it, but now that he thought about it, he felt that maybe some kind of power was secretly expanding the true martial domain. The level of science and technology that was constantly advancing suddenly stagnated. More and more strange beasts that had opened their spiritual wisdom took all kinds of abnormalities into consideration. Chen Guang also confirmed his conjecture in his heart. The mastermind behind the scenes seemed to be changing the setting of the true martial domain bit by bit, and also changing the style of the human players who entered from the outside world. When everyone slowly transitioned from the style of science and technology to the style of fantasy set by the Chinese martial arts, the human players as outsiders would be thoroughly integrated into the true martial domain. Everyone who was familiar with him was immersed in this world, and Chen Guang himself was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stay out of it, and could only go with the flow. The more he thought about it, the more uncertain Chen Guang became. But it seems like you have left behind a large group of very important people. My father and mother haven't even been pulled over, and they want me to become an orphan here? Chen Guang thought. If my father and mother, 7 aunts, 8 aunts, grandfather and grandmother were all pulled in, he was afraid that he would really be immersed in it without knowing it. In this regard, he could only say that he was very lucky. Then what did Wenwen discover? As he continued to go inside, Chen Guang saw traces of fighting one after another, but it seemed that the fighting was not intense, and both sides stopped after a brief encounter. It seems like those big and small footprints are running in front, but the small footprints belonging to Wenwen are lagging behind. Chen Guang stopped, lowered his head, and muttered to himself. It seemed like the 2 sides were fighting, and the offensive and defensive reversed, and it became Wenwen chasing, and the other side running away. What's going on? Wenwen is fighting and training at the same time. Has she become stronger? No, the probability of this happening is too low. Then there was only one explanation. The other side was anxious and in a hurry to retreat, but they could not kill Wenwen, so they were too lazy to fight back, and simply ran inside. Wenwen must have discovered something, so she chased after them. Chen Guang could not help but feel a little angry. He felt that Wenwen was too rash. If she had really discovered something, why would she need to personally take the risk? As long as she passed the news to him, He would be able to kill his way in with lightning speed. There was no risk in this, and he could control the situation in advance before the other side took action. However, things had already reached this point, and Chen Guang did not have the intention to blame anyone. Perhaps Wenwen only found a little bit of information and was not completely sure, so she decided to probe the situation first. Unknowingly, another half a day passed, and Chen Guang once again ran nearly 1,000 kilometers inside. This end of Thought Valley was in the shape of an inverted gourd, and the deeper he went, the bigger it became. Along the way, more and more strange beasts appeared, each stronger than the last. From the level of ordinary martial emperors, they gradually reached the level of the guiding 13 squadrons. At first, when these strange beasts saw how powerful Chen Guang was, they disappeared in a flash, turning around and running away. But later, when strange beasts with strength close to the holy city's 3 emperors appeared, these previously timid strange beasts suddenly seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and they desperately rushed towards Chen Guang. Chen Guang raised his hand. He was too lazy to waste time talking nonsense. He killed one with a finger and continued to go in. Don't look at how these strange beasts were exceptionally terrifying in front of others. In front of Chen Guang, they were completely useless. They could not even slow down his speed. As a result, Chen Guang flew on the ground. His 10 fingers were like a machine gun, shooting in all directions. Every time he pointed, there would be a corpse. This continued for a long time. Although Chen Guang could not be exhausted, he could not stand it, and he felt even more strange. Since strange beasts had spiritual intelligence, now that he had released his aura, they should have fled at the sight of him. At this time, their behavior was so abnormal. There must be something strange. There was only one explanation. There was someone behind the strange beasts. After Chen Guang turned his hand and slapped a strong strange beast whose strength was close to Senior Nun Xing Yuan and Wu Qingming, he searched its soul, and sure enough, he found that an obsession was planted in its mind. This obsession was not targeted at him, but it wanted them to think of ways to stop all humans who tried to enter the depths of the end of Thought Valley, even at the cost of their lives. After flipping over a large stone, Chen Guang suddenly stopped moving forward, and a magnificent city appeared in front of him. This was originally a basin plain that was washed out by the river, covering an area of more than 1,000,000 acres. But at this time, it had been completely transformed into a huge city. The city did not have city walls, and the periphery was surrounded by 2 transformed rivers. The styles of the houses and buildings were very different. There were Chinese-style Suzhou gardens, European-style Gothic buildings, and even Indian-style totem buildings. Even with Chen Guang's vast knowledge, he could not identify the strange style. Without a doubt, this was the base of the Protoss hidden in the true martial realm. They actually built such a magnificent city under his nose. According to the number of houses and the size of the city, it could at least accommodate 2 million people. Unlike the outposts outside the end of Thought Valley, the damage to the city was not high, and the terrifying earthquake only left cracks on some houses. According to the geological officer of the 9th Holy City, this was at least a magnitude 9 earthquake. Chen Guang personally speculated that it might even be above level 10, and the energy released would not only cause this little damage. After a moment, he finally understood. The Protoss had actually laid a divine inscription formation on the ground of the entire city, which was automatically triggered when the earthquake occurred, and mitigated the impact of the earthquake. Chen Guang bent down, touched the ground, and felt a slightly familiar fluctuation of divine power. This was the aura of Vasani, whom he had met once before. Suddenly, Chen Guang's heart moved, and he turned around and rushed into the city, only stopping when he was about 20 kilometers away from the city. In front of him was a very flat wasteland, which seemed to have been hastily covered with soil. Chen Guang's palm hit the ground, and more than 100 acres of land was turned over. 9 deep pits appeared on the ground, and Chen Guang clenched his teeth tightly. The ancient well was really here, and this group of bastards had taken it with them when they left. Could it be that the Protoss planned to take the ancient well to the endless divine realm through their back door? If they really succeeded, Then even if he saw through all the schemes, it would be useless, and he would be dead. Chapter 1281. Although he was a little panicked, he had already reached his limit. He couldn't go any faster. Chen Guang couldn't help but feel regretful. If the aura here wasn't so mysterious and unpredictable, he could have flown the plane here. His speed would have been much faster, and he would have reached his destination by now. However, there was no point in being anxious. He had already arrived here at this juncture. Perhaps he could catch the last train of the divine race. At least it was better than losing without knowing anything. His current speed should be equivalent to more than 180 kilometers per hour on Earth. 2 days passed unknowingly. He finally arrived at the deepest part of the terminating Thought Valley, which was marked on the map. A light screen made entirely of energy appeared in front of him. The light screen emitted a dense glow. It rose from the ground and went straight to the sky. He tried to touch the light screen. As soon as he touched it, he felt an astonishing power attacking him from the light screen. This power was stronger than he had imagined. It wasn't something that could appear in the true martial realm. From this power, Chen Guang could feel at least 3 characteristics. There was the yin and yang energy of the true martial realm. There was also the divine power of the divine race. However, the core was a third power that he had never felt before. He could roughly feel that this power was similar to the power of the Holy Grail. However, it was of a higher level. This third kind of power seemed to have the all-encompassing ability. It had perfectly combined the yin and yang energy and the divine power. It had formed an effect of 1 + 1 = 1. Even the strongest expert of the true martial world, a martial sage who had almost completely fused with the entire world, could suppress him. What was this third power? Was its level above the power of the Holy Grail? He couldn't help but be astonished. Up until now, whether it was Lazuli's divine power, Yuting's divine power, or even the power of the natural order that existed at all times in the universe on Earth, their level could not be compared to the power of the Holy Grail. The reason was simple. Although the Holy Grail was a divine weapon from the endless realm of the gods, and appeared to be an unassuming cup, it could create entire planes and worlds out of thin air. Although the levels of this world were high and low, there was the extremely simple and crude mosaic version of the first layer of heaven. However, there was also the huge structure of the 8th layer of heaven, the realm of true martial arts and the Sea of Time. In fact, there was even the world of destiny that Chen Guang had a deep memory of after he had caught a glimpse of it. Although the world of destiny was also flat, it was unknown how big it was. It might even be trillions of times bigger than the true martial realm. Its worldview and structure were no different from the universe, where Earth was located. However, even such a massive and majestic plane could still be controlled by the power of the Holy Grail. So, what exactly was this third power that had appeared in front of him? Chen Guang furrowed his brows tightly. He tried again, but realized that it was still useless. With the power that he currently controlled, there was only one way to break this light curtain. That was to use all the power in his body and completely mobilize all the power that he could mobilize in the true martial realm. Then, he would use the strength of absolute suppression to offset the difference in quality and forcefully break the light curtain. However, if he did that, he was afraid that he would be exhausted in a short period of time. He did not know what kind of situation he would encounter inside, and this would put him in danger. Chen Guang raised his head and looked up. He first tried to fly up into the sky to see if he could find a way to circumvent it. However, when he really flew up, he immediately dispelled this idea. The light curtain extended from the ground of the Valley of Despair to the mountains on both sides of the Valley of Despair. Then, it continued to extend along the mountains on both sides, and it covered the entire depths of the Valley of Despair like a piece of plastic wrap. Chen Guang did not need to try to break through the mountains to make a hole. The other party was not stupid and would not leave such an obvious hole. Even if he broke through the mountains, he would most likely hit the same light curtain in the hole. For the same reason, it was the same to dig a hole in the ground. It seemed that he had no other choice. Landing back on the ground, Chen Guang took a deep breath and his expression instantly became exceptionally solemn. He took another 10 steps back and slowly adjusted his breathing. The terrifying inner energy flowed through his body like a raging river. The inner strength that was rushing through every meridian in his body could be described as a tangible river. In reality, there were three major realms of muscle, bone, and skin as the dividing line. If the inner strength of a muscle strength martial artist was a small stream, the inner strength of a bone strength martial artist was a tributary of the Yangtze River, and the skin strength martial artist was the main stream of the Yangtze River. As for the internal energy in Chen Guang's body, it could no longer be described as the rivers on Earth. Every meridian was surging with the deep ocean currents of the Pacific Ocean. When all of them were added together, it was equivalent to the movement of half of the Pacific Ocean's water. As he continued to operate his power, the airflow around him was pulled by his qi. First, a small whirlwind was born under his feet. After a while, these small whirlwinds gradually merged together and turned into a tornado that lingered around him. This tornado, with Chen Guang as the center, roared and expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a while, the whirlwind turned into a giant tornado with a diameter of more than 500 meters. This was only the part close to the ground. The higher it went, the larger the diameter became. In the sky far higher than the Earth, the diameter of the tornado even expanded to thousands of kilometers. The yin and yang qi in the Zhenwu Jia followed the traction of this tornado. It crazily swarmed from all directions and converged into the tornado. However, the direction was completely opposite to the airflow. From top to bottom, it condensed into the body of Chen Guang at the bottom. The strong airflow took away the soil around Chen Guang, and even the ground around him gradually sunk. After half an hour, he actually created a mountain. The shape of this mountain was very strange. Its diameter was only 100 meters. The top of the mountain seemed to have been flattened by a knife. The shape of the whole mountain was like an upside-down ice cream cone. The mountain wall below was also flattened. If it went forward, it would hit the light curtain. It couldn't go any further. The light curtain that was hidden under the ground was gradually revealed. At this time, the ground had been sucked away by at least 500 meters by the tornado created by Chen Guang. However, the bottom still couldn't be seen. Only God knew how deep it was under the light curtain. Chen Guang didn't even make a move. He just accumulated his strength to create such power. With the continuous infusion of the yin and yang qi of the Zhenwu Jia, Chen Guang's body shape and appearance gradually changed. He looked more and more like himself on Earth. It seemed that because of the gradual deepening of his integration with the Zhenwu Jia, the transformation of the game system was gradually suppressed by his own strength. After a while, Chen Guang finally completely restored his appearance and body shape in the outside world. When the energy in his body surged to the point that he couldn't control it, he finally shouted and punched forward. This punch came out of nowhere. The explosive strength was first compressed to the extreme. Then, it turned into a snow-white strength and bombarded forward. This strength did not look very big. However, it had condensed all the yin and yang qi within a radius of thousands of kilometers in the Zhenwu Jia. It had already been compressed to the extreme. The strength brazenly bombarded the light curtain. A loud sound spread, and the light curtain shook violently. Ripples began to appear on its surface. They spread in a circle around the place that was bombarded. The light curtain lasted for less than 10 seconds. Finally, a hole that could fit one person was broken. Chen Guang's toes bounced off the ground, and he fiercely rushed forward. He rushed through the hole the moment it reformed. When he passed through the light curtain, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. A moment ago, he was still in the cold and damp depths of the terminating thought valley. However, it was only a thin wall. It was as if he had arrived in another world. Here birds were singing, flowers were fragrant, and the sun was shining brightly. As far as the eye could see, it was a beautiful scene. The air was filled with a complicated and difficult to understand aura. This wasn't a real aura, but some kind of power that contained rules. This power was like the power of the Holy Grail. It was also like the third power that formed the light curtain. At the same time, it felt like the yin and yang qi of the Zhenwu Jia. At the same time, It was mixed with the divine power of the gods. Chen Guang raised his hand slightly. Lightning flashed on his fingertips. The divine power of the gods was also mixed. God knew how many divine powers of the gods were left in it. Among them, the most obvious ones were much more tyrannical than ordinary divine powers. As for the lightning on his fingertips, it belonged to his old acquaintance Yu Ting. Looking up, the light pillar that he saw in the 9th holy city still stood in the sky not far away. There was a black shadow slowly floating in the light pillar. It seemed that the light pillar that he saw before did not disappear. Instead, it was transferred to this light curtain by that mysterious power. Perhaps it was transferred to another space. This fairyland-like place should be the transfer station from the Zhenwu Jia to the endless god realm. Then, the gods here should be much stronger than in the game. This could be seen from the fact that Yu Ting's remaining divine power could still condense lightning on his fingertips. Chen Guang took a deep breath. No matter what, he could not accept the fate of being trapped in the Zhenwu Jia forever with everyone. So, no matter the outcome, since he was caught, there would be a place for him to stand. With that in mind, he flew forward. In less than 5 minutes, he stopped abruptly. This was probably the last trace of Wenwen's battle that he had seen so far. The ground was full of holes from the fierce battle. Wenwen seemed to have unleashed the peak strength of a martial emperor. Judging from the marks on the ground, Chen Guang could even conclude that Wenwen's strength was infinitely close to his before he broke through to the martial sage realm. But in the end, she was not the master of the heavenly Holy Grail. No matter how talented she was, she lacked the most important thing compared to him. Looking at the back of the dead, but still holding the long sword in one hand, Chen Guang suddenly felt as if many things had been taken out of his heart. In the end, he was still one step too late. She died in battle. Chapter 1282. If Wenwen had died in the real world, Chen Guang did not know how hysterical he would be. But now, even though he knew that this was just a game, even though he knew that Wenwen would still be safe and sound in the real world, and that all her memories of this game would be stripped away, Chen Guang still felt an indescribable coldness in his heart as he looked at her back. He did not even need to get close to see her face. Even though they had not seen each other for a long time, the image of her in green clothes and holding the black saber in her hand was unforgettable. It was not hard to imagine what kind of fierce battle she had experienced before she died. Perhaps before coming here, she did not think that it would be so dangerous. With her strength of a martial emperor, who was close to the martial saint realm, even if she could not kill the Protoss, she should be more than enough to protect herself. But once she passed through the light curtain and entered this mysterious place, the power of the Protoss would suddenly increase. With Wenwen's cultivation, it would be very dangerous. Chen Guang went to the front of Wenwen and looked at her face, which was still glaring angrily. Unexpectedly, there were not many wounds on her body, and her clothes were not very damaged. But with Chen Guang's perception, he did not need to reach out to check her breathing to know that she had been dead for a while. There was not the slightest trace of vitality in her body, only a decisive aura of death. Her protective chi was directly broken by a tyrannical divine power, and she died instantly. An inexplicable breeze blew, and Wenwen, who was standing in front of Chen Guang, began to slowly turn into countless fine dust under this breeze, and drifted away. Chen Guang raised his hand, trying to grab something, but he could only feel the breeze and the fine dust that Wenwen's body had turned into gently passing through his fingertips. At this moment, he felt complicated and incomprehensible. He was a little sad, a little resentful and unwilling, but more than that he was grateful. In his mind, he had already sorted out the ins and outs of the entire matter. The situation that the mysterious force manipulated in the dark was originally foolproof. It had forcibly created such a city for the divine race in the true martial domain, which was under the control of the entire world. At the same time, perhaps it was because of the innate ability of humans to adapt to the outside world. Or perhaps it was because everyone's mind was secretly manipulated. However, the human players had gradually become addicted to the true martial domain during these 50 years, and they were unable to extricate themselves. The identity of the immortal elder, the temptation of immortality, was enough to make many people crazy with excitement. Even though they were worried about their families in the outside world, the players who entered this world were like the people around Chen Guang, unconsciously ignored many things that should not be abandoned. Chen Guang might be the only one sober, but it was useless. He couldn't even change the minds of Tang Ying, Zhuo Jingxi, Chu Zijin and Lu Fei, not to mention the others. The mysterious power seemed to be manipulating everything in the deepest subconscious of the players' hearts. It was manipulated by external objects, words, and even hypnosis. Otherwise, even if Chen Guang used a mental cultivation technique, he wouldn't be able to resist it. But in the end, there was someone else who was awake. It was none other than Wenwen, whom he had not seen for a long time. He had planned to look for her, through her classmates in the real world, after the world in the cup was over. Chen Guang even felt that she might have discovered something long before the jump barrier was triggered, when Wenwen started to disappear. Only after entering this world within cup would she do this with such a clear goal. He resolutely refused to meet me, and used 50 years to crazily increase his cultivation to the peak of the martial emperor realm in the true martial world. Then, he appeared here at the most critical moment. Chen Guang speculated that if it wasn't for Wenwen's timely appearance, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to see the strange pillar of light that shot up into the sky, and the earthquake wouldn't have spread outside, so he wouldn't have been able to find this place. He was sure that the Protoss didn't expect someone to suddenly break in at this time. They had waited for 50 years, prepared for 50 years, and had always been very stable. They were planning to quietly leave and slightly relax their vigilance, but they didn't expect someone to break in at the last moment and coincidentally step on the last node of the space teleportation. The result of this situation was that the smuggling operation, which should have been completed quietly, was leaked. The pillar of light that shot up into the sky was indeed the escape channel of the Protoss. The process should have been completed secretly in this mysterious place, but it was detected by Chen Guang, who was in the outside world. He watched as Wenwen passed away, and tried to figure out what had happened in his mind. Perhaps there were some differences in the details, but the context of the matter should be similar. Chen Guang took a deep breath. He still remembered that when he was weak, in school, or in the internet cafes outside the school, she was always there to protect him. Now that he had become the #1 martial artist in the world, the master of the transcending heaven Holy Grail, and the invincible martial saint in this true martial domain, he was so eager to get her to come to his side. Although the two of them had already broken through that layer of window paper, Chen Guang's heart was not really because of those dirty thoughts, but purely because he felt that she was safe and at ease by his side. In the end, he never expected that she already had her own ideas, and even made a decision from the very beginning. She must not be like the others who were muddle-headed, but knew from the beginning that this was a trap, and then used 50 years of experience to send the most important signal to him at the most critical moment. Chen Guang's gaze slowly moved forward, and after passing through the light curtain, the aura that originally suppressed his mental strength slowly faded, and in his mind's eye, a huge divine inscription matrix gradually appeared. From his side, it extended all the way to the still bright pillar of light in the distance. Looking from afar, this divine inscription matrix was a standard circle, and the boundary of the circle was right under Chen Guang's feet, extending at a slight angle all the way to the distance. From this arc, the position of the center of the circle was clearly that pillar of light that soared into the sky. Looking down again, the place where Wenwen was previously standing was slowly forming a matrix within a matrix. This should be one of the matrix's eyes. Presumably, she had stepped on this matrix's eye, and temporarily broke the stability of the divine inscription matrix, which caused the opponent's plan to go down the drain. No longer hesitating, Chen Guang broke into a run, and directly rushed towards that pillar of light. As the saying goes, see the mountain, see the horse run to death. This was probably his current situation. Looking from afar, that pillar of light was very clear, as if it was very close, but when he really intended to run in that direction, he discovered that it was at least 100 miles away. Fortunately, Chen Guang recovered quickly. Although that punch just now had consumed most of his strength, it seemed that after entering this mysterious space, his strength had also recovered at a speed far faster than usual, with the help of the strange energy formed by the 4 strange energies mixed together. As he ran, he was puzzled in his heart. Logically speaking, this rule energy should be greatly beneficial to the God clan. But why was it that he also felt as if he was bathing in a hot spring, and his whole body felt very comfortable? Furthermore, he had a faint feeling that it was impossible for him to continue breaking through to the Martial Saint realm, and was faintly loosening. Could it be that my cultivation could still increase? He was simply indescribably shocked. No one knew better than him that the Martial Saint realm was already the strongest strength that the entire True Force domain could accommodate, and had already completely reached the upper limit, touching the ceiling. The moment he became a Martial Saint, his entire person had already become a part of the True Force domain. Of course, it could also be said that the True Force domain had become a part of him. Now it was still getting stronger, and he himself did not know what kind of state it would be after the Martial Saint realm. However, at this moment, he did not have time to figure out what was so strange about this matter. He only rushed forward like a cannonball, bringing up a strong gust of wind behind him, and looked like a sprinting sports car. Boom! There was a loud noise, and Chen Guang's feet left 2 long marks on the ground. He had finally reached his destination. However, the scene that appeared in front of him was not what he had imagined. He had thought that the God clan was retreating, and the scene should be quite chaotic. However, at this moment, there were 999 God clan members standing here in a strict formation, and they had an orderly bearing. There were exactly 999 people, no more no less. Among them, Divine Emperor Yu Ting and Divine Emperor 8 Directions, the 2 experts that Chen Guang had met once before, stood in the front of the formation, but there were 6 other people standing side by side with them. Chen Guang remembered that Liuli had once mentioned that she was one of the 10 strongest Divine Emperors in the Endless God realm, and that Yu Ting's strength was vaguely above hers, and definitely not weaker than hers. Now, it seemed that since the other 6 Divine Emperors could stand side by side with Yu Ting, it meant that their strength was not inferior to Yu Ting's. 8 of the 10 Divine Emperors had come, and all of them were standing here. What a surprise! I originally thought that as Divine Emperors you should leave first. After all, in my world, it has always been popular to let the leader leave first. As Chen Guang spoke, he looked up at the light pillar behind the God clan, and there were still humanoid figures flying up one after another. Yu Ting took a step forward. "We have no intention of leaving," Chen Guang interrupted him. "I know what you want to say. This is a trap, right?" "It wasn't a trap, but something happened at the last minute, so you will probably die here." Yu Ting smiled, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. Chen Guang pretended to be surprised. "Don't you know that you can't kill me in the game dimension?" The 8 Divine Emperors next to Yu Ting said impatiently. "What's with all the nonsense? We have our own methods. There's no need for you to worry about it." "Where's the ancient well? Where is it?" Chen Guang didn't mind being offended by the 8 Divine Emperors, and pretended to be calm. "It's already been destroyed by us, so just give up." The 8 Divine Emperors impatiently waved their hands. Chen Guang, however, could tell from their expressions that they were bluffing. "Destroyed? You can't do that, can you?" If the ancient well could be destroyed so easily, why would they waste so much effort to take it away? That thing was a mission item for the realm within a cup, protected by the core laws of the Holy Grail, so it couldn't be destroyed. Even the noble gods are full of lies. It seems that the so-called gods are nothing more than this. Since you were planning to ambush me, and I was planning to kill you, then let's do it now. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, Chen Guang's expression suddenly changed, and he made the first move. The one who strikes first gains the upper hand, and the one who strikes last suffers. Right now he was fearless. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.